Chapter 978. Baligaju sneered. The black thumb ring on his finger glowed as he clasped the handrail. Everyone knew that the king was not to be trifled with. But no one knew why the usually emotionless king was so cold when he woke up this morning. Even though they lived 9,000 feet below the ground, they still wanted to jump out of the villa to get some fresh air. However, in the next second, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly changed. When Baligaju saw the woman cooking in the kitchen, the corners of his mouth curled up. Even the temperature around him rose by a few degrees. The demons were so moved that they were about to cry. The Phoenix King was an angel who came to save them. What are you doing? Baligaju reached out and hugged his little phoenix from behind. Hellion Vivian didn't stop. She put down the kitchen knife and opened the lid of the pot. She pinched a fried bun and fed it to him. I just made it. Eat it while it's hot. There's your favorite prawns inside. Bailey Jiaju chewed on the small fried bun that was crispy on the outside and crispy on the inside. He only felt that his whole body was warm. Although he didn't have much of a desire for human food other than his soul, it was an exception when it was made by a certain someone. Is it good? Yes. Then I'll pinch more. Hellion Vivian looked very happy. There's nothing in the fridge. I just sent someone to buy these prawns. I only bought a little. But there's also bean and egg stuffing. Since you like beans, eat a few more before you go to the company. Baligaju ate another bun. But this time, he pinched it and put it into his mouth himself. I don't have to go to the company. Don't have to go to the company. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. But today is Thursday. Baligaju's voice was very calm and unhurried. The company's day off is Thursday. Hellion Vivian. Bailey Shangxia was tying a napkin for his younger brother, who was sitting at the dining table. Hearing his father's words, he couldn't stand it anymore, and rolled his eyes disdainfully. His Highness seemed to have realized that his lie this time was too clumsy, so he calmly changed the topic. Why is the fried bun so small? Qingchen and Shangxia are still young. It's not convenient for them to eat big ones, but it's not easy for them to become oily if they eat small ones. Also, it's easier for them to digest. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she wrapped another small fried bun and put it into the pot. Then she covered the pot with the lid. Okay, it'll be ready in 10 minutes. I'll wrap something else. It was obvious that Bailey Jiaju did not want Hellion Weiwei to pay attention to others, even if it was his son. You don't have to go through so much trouble. Those two brats can digest anything they eat. For some reason, Hellion Vivian wanted to laugh when she saw the way His Highness pursed his thin lips. She tilted her head and kissed him. Help me bring the plate up. Bailey Jiaju's mood was obviously better, but he still felt that the two little light bulbs sitting opposite him were an eyesore. Not to mention Qing Chen. The most eyesore to him was his eldest son, who obviously did not need to eat human food, but still wanted to snatch the pan-fried dumplings with him. Bailey Shangxia's favorite pastime was to make his father unhappy. He knew how possessive his father was, so he deliberately ate a few more pan-fried buns. Baligaju looked at his behavior coldly and then smiled. Shangxia, you don't have to go to kindergarten today. The advertiser we worked with last time is very satisfied with you and appointed you to shoot the advertisement. Come to the company with me in the afternoon. There are some things I need to talk to you about in private. Bailey Shangxia choked on his own food. Dad, it's not good for me to be doing this at such a young age, right? Hellion Qingchen. Is there no ambiguity in this sentence? You don't want to enter the acting industry? Baligaju raised his eyebrows dangerously. Bailey Shangxia gritted his teeth. He wanted to, but he didn't want to talk to his father in private. What was the difference between that and being one-sided? I also think that Shangxia is too young. Hellion Vivian patted her eldest son's head. Isn't it too early for him to enter the acting industry? Baligaju looked at Hellion Vivian slowly. No, he's already 3 years old. It's time for him to earn money to support himself. Hellion Vivian. It was obvious that she and His Highness's definition of age were not on the same level. However, as a good brother, Bailey Shangxia reluctantly agreed when he heard that he could earn money. In the past, Bailey Shangxia had never cared about these things. However, ever since he had Qingchen, he deeply realized that he had to shoulder the heavy responsibility of supporting the family. Bailey Shangxia's definition of supporting the family was to buy delicious food for his younger brother, to buy fun things for his younger brother, and to give his younger brother a lot of money. Therefore, on that day, Bailey Shangxia arrogantly followed his father into the company. Usually, there weren't many people in the CEO's office of the Juwei Group. This made it very convenient for Beligaju to communicate with his son in a friendly manner. First, tell me how you have slandered me in front of your imperial mother. Dad, I can tell you, but can you not make me stick to the wall like this? I'm scaring away all the ghosts around me. Bailey Shangxia raised his two small arms and bared his little fangs that belonged to a demon. Bailey Jiaju was very indifferent and did not want to be long-winded. He took out his phone and opened up WeChat. Look at the phone and confess all your crimes to your mother. Also, tell her at least 3 good points about me. Otherwise, I will throw you back to the magical realm in a month's time. No matter how cool Bailey Shangxia was, he was now listless. He drooped his little head and began to repent of his crimes. Mom, I shouldn't say that Dad has had many women. In fact, he has been relying on his right hand for the past 3 years. You know how perverted he is. He thinks that everyone is dirty when he looks at them. Yes, I shouldn't say that he cheated, and I shouldn't have thought of running away from home with you and your younger brother. He asked me to tell him 3 good points about him, but I can't think of a single one even after thinking for a long time. When Helene Vivian heard the last WeChat message, she heard a man's deep voice. Little brat, shut up. She couldn't help but laugh. Instead of replying to the message, she directly called him. What are you doing? He's feeling uneasy and is repenting. Beligaju lied without batting an eyelid. Where are you now? Helene Vivian put away the things in her hands. I'm at the car dealership. But I'm almost done here. There's nothing in the fridge at home. I'm thinking of bringing Qingchen to the supermarket later. I didn't drive when I came out today. Beligaju's gaze swept across his eldest son, who was still sticking to the corner of the wall, and the countless reporters who were standing outside the building. His thin lips slowly curved. Come and pick me up. We'll go to the supermarket together, and then we'll go home. Chapter 979. I didn't drive when I came out today. Beligaju's gaze swept across his eldest son, who was still sticking close to the corner of the wall, as well as the countless reporters standing outside the building. His thin lips slowly curved into a smile. Come and pick me up. We'll go to the supermarket together, then we'll go home. Helene Vivian did not suspect anything. Her voice was crisp. All right, I'll look for you in a while. Let's talk later. I still have something to do here. Beligaju looked at the phone that had been hung up. He did not show any signs of displeasure. Instead, the smile on his face deepened. Bailey Shangxia was still there with his arms raised. His expression was very cool. In his heart, he was thinking, Juwei Group has so many cars. Any one of them could have sent Dad home. Why did he want Mom to pick him up? No matter how he thought about it, there must be a conspiracy. Could it be related to the reporters outside? A glint flashed across Bailey Shangxia's crimson eyes. Was Dad trying to? CEO Ju, all the reporters outside have arrived. Manager Zhang, who was in charge of corporate publicity, walked over with a smile. I just don't know what CEO Ju wants to announce. All the reporters are very excited. However, they are worried that they might ask questions that they shouldn't ask. That's why they sent me to ask CEO Ju in advance. Is there anything that CEO Ju can't talk about? Bailey Jiaju crossed his slender legs. The side of his face was handsome. There's nothing that can't be discussed because... Speaking to this point, he paused and looked up at Manager Zhang with a smile that wasn't a smile. This time, what I want to announce is my private affairs. Private affairs. Manager Zhang's eyes widened. For a moment he lost his composure. One could not blame him for this reaction. One had to know that their boss had been very mysterious since the day he came to a city. He was a truly well-known figure, not only in City A, but also in the surrounding cities. As long as one was in the business world, there were few who did not know Beligaju. Many people racked their brains to get close to the boss. When the media heard the boss's name, they would want to get some first-hand information. However, the media did not dare to do so because they could not afford to offend this king-like man. Previously, President Du, who was in charge of publicity, had violated his boss's taboo and brought a large number of media outlets to interview him. That was why he was directly kicked out of Juwei Group and even cut off his future business path. Now, the president was actually calling for a press conference to discuss his personal matters. Manager Zhang felt that the world was a little surreal, so much so that he began to wonder if he had heard wrongly. What? Baligaju put down the pen in his hand and raised an eyebrow at him. Do you have any questions? Manager Zhang quickly shook his head. No. I'll go and get the media ready for the interview now. Manager Zhang regained his ability and experience. Xiaoju, I'll go first. Baligaju nodded. Bailey Shangxia opened his mouth and said, Manager Zhang, help me find an agent. Manager Zhang stopped in his tracks in confusion. If it were any other child who had said such words, he would have definitely coaxed them with candy. However, the person who had said such words was the devilish little boss. Everyone in the upper management of the Juwei Group knew that no one could provoke this little boss. He was different from ordinary rich second-generation heirs. He did not need to rely on anyone's power to make people feel numb after seeing his means. Manager Zhang often wondered who CEO Zhu had given birth to such a genius. Just by standing there, he was born to make people want to submit to him, even if he was just a child. That's right, manager. Bailey Shangxia was still standing as a punishment, so he could not move his arms. He only looked at Manager Zhang and said coolly, I need a gold medal manager to help me debut. Debut? Manager Zhang felt that today's surprises were coming one after another. Could the debut that the little master was talking about be the debut that he was thinking of? Bailey Shangxia nodded casually. From today onwards, I will officially enter the entertainment industry. In the future, I will appear in front of you from time to time. Also, other than a manager, you better find me an assistant who can save money. Otherwise, Manager Zhang, I will fire you. Manager Zhang. Damn it. He was in charge of publicity, not human resources. Why couldn't the devil little master find a suitable assistant? He was the one who was fired. I'll try my best. Manager Zhang felt very helpless. For the 134th time in his life, he had the urge to resign and leave. However, when he thought about it carefully, other than the big and small bosses who were harder to please, everything else in the Juwei Group was very smooth, especially when it came to money. Well, there's no hurry to find an assistant. You can call the best manager first and ask him to come over. When the little one said this, his tone was very cool. However, when a child said this while leaning against the corner of the wall with his hands slightly raised, it really made people want to laugh. Manager Zhang resisted the urge to laugh until one of the best managers in the entertainment industry walked in with a confused look on his face. Only then did he feel relieved. CEO Zhu, are you looking for me? As expected of a top manager, he was very good at observing the atmosphere. When he walked into the office and raised the corner of his eyes, he more or less understood that the person who was looking for him was definitely not Manager Zhang. However, what was the devil little boss doing? If he was not wrong, was he being punished to stand? The top manager only glanced at Bailey Shangxia once, and did not dare to take a second look. After all, everyone knew that the devil little boss was not to be trifled with. Although his current posture was extremely cute, it was still the same. Baligaju's voice was still graceful and noble. Even if he did not look up, it still gave off a strong sense of oppression. The person who is looking for you is not me. Then, the top manager was a little confused. After all, Manager Zhang only told him to come up as soon as possible over the phone, and did not tell him what was going on. Even the secretary outside the office did not know anything. According to usual practice, he would not be called to the top floor. After all, the entertainment industry was only a small part of the Juwei Group. No matter how good he was still just a manager. Why would he be summoned? I asked Manager Zhang to introduce you to me. The little one pressed his back against the wall and pursed his lips. It's not convenient for me to take the documents in this position. There's a contract on the office table. Help me take a look. If there's no problem, sign the contract with the other party. I want to debut immediately. Debut. Introduce. His reaction was the same as Manager Zhang's. The top manager trembled and immediately glanced at Manager Zhang. We've been classmates for so many years. How could you frame me like this? Chapter 980. Manager Zhang started to look at the ceiling guiltily. He had no other choice, because if there was no one to distract the devilish young master, he would be the one to suffer. He could only drag his good friend down with him. As the saying goes, good friends are meant to be tricked. The golden manager stabilized his emotions and began to convince himself that at the very least, there was no other child in the world who had a better temperament than the demonic young master. Although people who spent too much time with the young master would go crazy, that unique demonic little face of his would definitely be popular the moment he debuted. Moreover, all the resources of the Ju Wei group would be used on him. If he counted carefully, would this be considered a promotion? After some mental preparation, the manager looked through the information. This commercial is not bad. It's a big name in the country, suitable for the young master's identity. If you debut with this commercial, it should be easy for people to remember you. It's okay if they don't remember. The point is, how much did they pay? Bailey Shangxia raised his little eyebrow. The manager glanced at the price and said, although it's not as good as movie stars, the young master's identity is still there. They also gave a fair price. Bailey Shangxia heard this and raised his little chin. I can appear on screen half naked. So, the manager's eyes were filled with confusion. He really didn't understand why the devilish young master would change the topic to this. Shouldn't it be more expensive to appear on screen half naked? Bailey Shangxia pointed at him with his little finger and said in a very imposing manner, so you should tell them to be responsible for giving me more money. The manager. That's right. Indeed, some movie stars would be more expensive if they appeared on screen half naked. But what's the use of being naked for a 3-year-old brat? Tell me, who will look at you? Who will look at you? Manager Zhang was also listening at the side, and he almost couldn't help but laugh out loud, especially when he saw his good friend's entire body petrified on the spot. He covered his mouth and coughed twice before saying, young master, when you first start out, money isn't the main point. The key is to gain popularity. To me, more money is the most important. Bailey Shangxia said very firmly. The gold medal manager frowned. Young master, why do you need so much money? The shares of Ju Wei Group were rising every day. What was wrong with the young master? Bailey Shangxia furrowed his brows and said, you should know how difficult it is to support a family now. He had always known that it was not easy to support a family, but why would a 3-year-old child say such words? The golden agent, who had always been calm in front of the media, grabbed her hair and asked, so? That's why I asked them to give me more advertising fees. I don't know if this amount of money is enough to pay for my younger brother's teaching fees. Bailey Shangxia put on a cool expression and sighed seriously. Life is really not easy. The gold medal manager was speechless. What are you, a 3-year-old, acting like an old man for? Manager Zhang looked at his old classmate, who was about to go crazy, and pulled him over. He lowered his voice and whispered, did you hear what the young master said just now? Of course I heard it. He said that he wants to support a family. A 3-year-old child wants to support a family? The gold medal manager did not know whether to laugh or cry. He even said that he wants to teach his younger brother. Wait a minute. Younger brother. The gold medal manager and Manager Zhang looked at each other at lightning speed. Bam! Baligaju reached out and closed the Apple laptop on his desk. He raised his eyes and looked in their direction. The gold medal manager and Manager Zhang swallowed their saliva. They did not expect that the CEO, who had always been known as a devil, was in a good mood. He did not even mention their conversation just now. Instead, he looked at his 2 subordinates with a faint smile and said, from the car dealership to here. It should be about time. Go and prepare. Arrange for the media interview to be held in the lobby on the 1st floor. I will go down with Shangxia. Yes. Even though Manager Zhang had a lot of questions, he did not dare to ask. He walked out of the office first. The media was very enthusiastic. All kinds of cameras were crowded in the reception hall on the 1st floor. Every reporter was waiting for Baligaju to appear. However, at this moment, Hellion Vivian saw a person who was not supposed to be here. Woman, I have been looking for you for a long time before I finally found your location. In the darkness, a small figure was sitting cross-legged in a car. His eyes were bright ruby red, and there was a smile on his face. He looked extremely bloodthirsty and evil. The black scythe on his shoulder was 5 times taller than him. Due to the appearance of the small figure, the entire parking lot seemed to have sunk into an unprecedented chill. The other people who came to park their cars did not understand what was going on. They only felt that the weather was about 30 degrees Celsius. Why did it suddenly become so cold? Could it be because they were in the parking lot? A few people could not help but look behind them. However, they could not see what was going on. Only Hellion Vivian and Qingchen, who came with Hellion Vivian, could see the small figure with the aura of Hades. Behind him was a trembling judge. Little King of Hell. When Hellion Vivian spat out these 3 words, her willowy eyebrows furrowed. Why are you here? Little King of Hell said in a deep voice. It only shows that the power of love is great. For Little Hook, I don't care about anything else. Hellion Vivian. However, there is something you must know. Little King of Hell lowered his voice. I believe you have also felt it. Ever since your man came to the modern world, the evil aura around him has become more and more intense. Even his murderous aura can be easily revealed. Moreover, he is not aware of it. Hellion Vivian slowly raised her eyes. Her voice was very calm. What are you trying to say? This isn't a good sign. The son of the King of Hell rubbed his nose and said, Let me make this clear. I'm risking my life to deliver the news to you, because I know that you're Uncle Tang's friend, and we've been through thick and thin together since ancient times. That's why I'm here to inform you. Since tearing apart time and space is an act that defies the natural order, both humans and deities would exhaust a huge amount of energy to do so. Only a handful of people can do it. Perhaps Bailey Jiaju is the only one in this world who can do this and chase after you all the way to the modern era. However, the cost of doing so is equally huge. The price he paid to find you is his divinity. You should know that His Highness has fallen from heaven. If he doesn't have his divinity, it means that he will become a complete demon. Chapter 981. Hellion Vivian tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She looked at the little King of Hell, who was sitting in front of her. After losing her warmth, her beautiful eyes became especially sharp. It was easy to imagine the scene of her fighting a group of demons by herself. The little King of Hell had never forgotten that she was Phoenix, the Phoenix who could kill Blood Sea once she picked up the Phoenix bone knife. However, Hellion Vivian did not lose her temper. Instead, she smiled and turned around to pinch Qingchen's face. Son, you get out of the car first. I have something to talk to your little brother about. Qingchen had always been smart. He also understood Hellion Vivian. He knew that once she had decided on something, she would not let anyone interfere. He pushed open the car door and jumped down shakily. He was holding a devil doll in his hand. He did not understand what a godhead was. No one had ever told him about it. However, little Qingchen was very clear about one thing. This person did not bring good news. Perhaps he could think of a solution with his brother when he saw him. After all, it was related to his father. However, he did not know that Hellion Vivian did not want him to listen to what he was going to say next. It was because Beligage's change was very likely to hurt Hellion Vivian. It was because of this that the little King of Hell chose to tell her the news. Tian Dao Buddhism, and even the group of death gods in the Hades have started to prepare. You should know that when the emperor fell from heaven and became a demon, even the upper 3 Daos were afraid of him. After so many years, they would not want to see the emperor become a complete demon. If that happened, all living things in the world would be threatened. Without the suppression of the godhead, the evil aura would dominate. When that time comes, he would kill everyone. He won't become like that. Hellion Vivian interrupted the little King of Hell. Her side profile revealed a never-before-seen indifference. The little King of Hell narrowed his eyes at her. Woman, you should know what a complete demon means. Even you will only become his food when that time comes. Because you have made a contract. Once he helps you to fulfill your wish, the contract will take effect immediately. He will treat you as the most delicious food and devour you bite by bite. His Highness is different from others. He was born from chaos. Once he becomes a demon, he will lose all his humanity. You should know this. I know it very well. However, I will say it again, he won't become like that. Hellion Vivian retracted her hand from the steering wheel and looked at the little king of hell. I won't let him become like that. The little king of hell paused and shook his head. Woman, we all know that no one can stop this change. His godhead is gone. This time his godhead is really gone. Tearing through time and space is more terrifying than falling from heaven. Do you understand what I mean? He didn't find you before. Now that he has found you, the shackles are gone. He must have shown some signs of demonization, such as hating the sun and starting to thirst for blood. When will the war begin? Hellion Vivian didn't wait for the little king of hell to finish speaking. Her voice was so calm that the king of hell felt that she knew the direction of the situation better than he did. I know very well what the people of Tian Dao and Buddhism are thinking. This time, they came to the underworld because they know that they are not strong enough. They don't want to lose their godhead, so they formed an alliance. Since you came to me, it means that they are almost done with the matter. Have they started to arrange people around him? This time the underworld is on whose side, right? The little king of hell's expression became serious. That's right, Vivian. You have to understand that no one will tolerate an existence of the 6 paths of destruction. He turned from a god to a demon, and was born from chaos. He will become a killing machine, and you will be the first soul he will claim. That's why I came to tell you that this time, I'm afraid we will become enemies. To be honest, I don't want to be your enemy, but Vivian, you have to admit that when that time comes, he will no longer be the Beligaju you know. He is. Hellion Vivian's starry eyes that had been silent all this time seemed to have a glimmer of light. With a piercing determination she said, no matter what he becomes, he will always be him. Like you said, I don't want to be your enemy, but there is one thing that no one can hurt him in front of me. If the people of the underworld want to make a move, there is no need for him to use his demonic aura. The phoenix bone knife will make the first move. The little king of hell did not say anything. At that moment, the parking lot was very quiet. After an unknown amount of time, the little king of hell let out a long sigh. Even if the people of the underworld don't make a move, you won't be able to protect him. He will hurt you first, won't he? You are now resisting the heavenly Tao and the Buddhist Tao. But in the end, the one whose soul will be devoured will be you. You still don't understand what a killing machine means. I understand. Hellion Vivian's voice was somewhat heavy, and it carried a strong warning. Even if he becomes a killing machine, even if the entire world wants him to disappear, even if my soul will be devoured, I will protect him when I can. So don't challenge my bottom line. The little king of hell's eyes darkened. I understand. I will control the people of the underworld. But woman, you have to be careful. With that he stood up and smiled. If the entire world wants to be your enemy, then, should I stand by your side and sweep the world with my blade? Phoenix is indeed a phoenix. But what the little king of hell was worried about was, after losing his humanity, would Beligaju, who only wanted to kill, still know about these things? What scared him the most was that Beligaju should have already begun to change. How far has he changed? No one knew. Perhaps even he himself was only slightly aware of it. After all, demons represented the darkest of selfishness. He would do everything in his power to fulfill the wish of his exclusive soul. From that moment onwards, he had already begun to demonize. Therefore, Vivian was in the most dangerous situation. Even so, do I still have to stay by his side? The little king of hell looked at the axe in his hand and muttered to himself. The judge behind him stuttered. Little highness, if you tell all these things to Phoenix, Lord will definitely tie you up. Am I afraid of him? The little king of hell blew at his bangs. Go back and tell my father that I will take Little Go's surname in the future. Don't let him come to the human world to look for me. Don't you know that a married son is like spilled water? Chapter 982. Judge, you're clearly the one who's married off, okay? If the adults hear this, they'll definitely beat you to death. Little Highness, this isn't how you chase people. You're completely throwing yourself at them. Little King of Hell didn't care what others thought of him. He carried his giant axe and walked forward, completely ignoring judges' cries and screams. Qingchen stood there, her little hands playing with the ears of the demon plushie, her eyes looking at the abnormal little brother in front of her, but she didn't say anything. Little King of Hell was more interested in him. After all, he had never met a child younger than him, except for Little Hook, that was his future wife. When he saw Qingchen, he began to dig into his pocket. After a long time, he took out a piece of chocolate. "Do you want to eat? My wife gave it to me." Qingchen thought about it. She was going to see her brother later, and her brother liked to eat chocolate. So she took it, and then gave Little King of Hell a pearl, saying in a childish voice, "This is for your wife." Judge. Only you would take Little Highness's words seriously. How old is he? And he already has a wife. Little King of Hell was very happy. Because of Qingchen's words, he immediately decided to bring Little Hook to play with them in the future. He heard that he had an older brother. A pure little demon, he must be very bad. With an even worse creature as a foil, Little Hook realized that there was nothing bad about him, other than the fact that he liked to kill people and drag them to hell. It's decided, they'll ask him out to play in the future. Of course, that was on the premise that the Beligaju would really be as Hellion Vivian said, and was still safe in the car. Hellion Vivian looked at the two children who were talking. She was very clear about Little King of Hell's personality. Since she had just sent Qingchen away, Little King of Hell wouldn't tell Qingchen about this. That was good. Hellion Vivian tilted her head and opened the car door. She smiled and said, "Let's go, son. Follow me to pick them up." Qingchen swayed a little as she walked. Her little hand was held by Hellion Vivian as they entered the elevator. She lifted her little face and looked at the numbers on the elevator. "Don't worry." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Qingchen's eyes widened as she said, "My brother and I are here, so you don't have to worry." Hellion Vivian smiled and pulled her son's little head over. She lowered her head and kissed the hair on the top of his head. "I know. What do you want to eat tonight? Remember to choose when you go to the supermarket later." The mother and son often went to the supermarket before, so they were familiar with these things. On the other hand, the father and son pair had always been aloof. Not to mention going to the supermarket, they barely showed their faces in front of others. Therefore, when they walked out, all the cameras and gazes were focused on them. The media rushed to press the shutter button and did not even care about their image. They had never seen such a stylish father and son pair. The older one was so handsome that it made people's legs go weak. Wearing a noble pure black trench coat, he exuded elegance and nobility from his bones. The younger one was like a demon. He had a high nose bridge, light thin lips, and exquisite facial features that made people want to look at him again and again. His eyes also showed that he was not to be trifled with. The two of them standing in front of each other was simply too cute. Today, CEO Ju is holding a press conference to announce two things. This was the time to show the strength of a corporate marketing manager. Manager Lee stood up with a faint smile. His voice was not loud, but it was enough for all the reporters present to hear clearly. The first news is that from today onwards, the first successor of Ju Wei Group, young master Bailey Shangxia, will officially enter the entertainment industry. The media did not expect that the young master of Ju Wei Group would actually drop such a bombshell the moment he appeared. Everyone knew that Beligaju had a son, but this son was only seen by the higher-ups of Ju Wei Group. Everyone else had only heard of him. Now, not only did they see him, but he would also appear on TV screens from time to time. This was undoubtedly the headline of the headlines. The first successor of Ju Wei Group, entering the entertainment industry with such an identity, did not even need to think about it. He was going to explode in popularity. Plus his face. Oh my God. How could there be such a child? Many female reporters at the scene had already turned from passers-by to fans. Everyone was in the entertainment industry and knew very well what Bailey Shangxia's debut would predict. That face would not only cause a sensation in Asia, but also internationally. Of course, this news is not the main point of CEO Ju's announcement today. Manager Lee continued speaking and looked at Beligaju. The media was all surprised. This is not the main point. Then what is the main point? Manager Lee smiled and gestured for them to be quiet. Just as he was about to speak on his behalf like before, he heard his CEO's voice slowly ring out. His voice was slightly deep and magnetic. The main point is that I want to change the way you have introduced me in the past. I have read many magazines. When they mention me, they always say that I am single. In fact, this is wrong. I am already married. Furthermore, my wife loves me very much. After Bailey Jiaju uttered those words, one could imagine what kind of reaction the crowd had. All the media froze in an instant. Even Manager Lee, who was in charge of publicity, did not know that his CEO would hold a press conference to talk about this. Everyone felt like they had been struck dumb. Only Bailey Shangxia snorted coolly. Dad, that last sentence, did you mix up the object and the subject? This is the first time I have heard someone say that my wife loves me very much in an introduction. That's enough. I was just stating the facts. Baligaju glanced at him indifferently. Also, you can shut up and go look for your manager. His manager was still in shock. At this moment the media finally reacted. The entire venue was in an uproar. Manager Lee's first reaction was to stop them. However, someone pulled him aside. CEO Ju is really married? But why does the people in Juwei Group never know about your wife? I don't think you have a female companion before, right? Manager Lee thought that it was over. Another media company was going to close down. After all, although the CEO said that they could ask about his personal matters, such a question would definitely be cut off. However, Manager Lee did not expect that the usually cold and noble man would actually answer. And he even answered with a smile. There was a meaningful look at the corner of his mouth. You will see her in a while. Chapter 983. Baligaju's words were undoubtedly explosive news. Whether it was to the media reporters or Manager Lee, it was too shocking. A few of the company's female employees looked at each other. Their first reaction was that their CEO was really married and was not using this as a publicity stunt for the company. However, everyone's inner feelings were different. Some were envious while others were jealous. After all, they were all at the front desk, watching everyone entering and leaving the company. The CEO had never had intimate contact with anyone. In their eyes, Baligaju had always been single. As long as he was single, any one of them could become Cinderella. Generally, girls of this age were still inexperienced and were still dreaming. They did not know that Cinderella was as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns in the world. Everyone was wondering what kind of woman could actually capture the heart of a man like Baligaju. The media wanted to ask more questions, such as who the other party was, the other party's family background, and how the other party knew Bailey Jiaju. However, after Baligaju announced his sovereignty, he was not in the mood to answer the questions. He glanced indifferently at the reporters who were asking these questions. His gaze was extremely cold. The reporters were about to break out in cold sweat when they saw his stare. They did not dare to ask more questions. They moved their throats with difficulty and swallowed their words. The media immediately understood Baligaju's taboo and did not dare to ask more about Helly and Vivian. Everyone present was smart, and Manager Lee was even more so. After a few words, he already understood the main purpose of their cold and honorable CEO accepting the media's interview this time. It was obvious that the CEO was waiting for the media to arrive, so that he could let the whole world know that he was married, and that his wife loved him very much. Manager Lee was speechless. This press conference was completely used by the CEO as a means to announce his sovereignty. Where was the promised publicity for the company? Manager Lee was on the verge of tears. However, while he was being pulled away, he was distracted to look at the announcements released by the media. There were only a few pieces of news, but the headlines of all the major websites had the words Juwei Group floating above them. As a marketing manager, there was only one word left in his heart: beautiful. Under normal circumstances, the press conference would have ended at this point. However, since Manager Lee knew what the CEO was thinking, of course he would not relax. He enthusiastically began to answer some unimportant questions. Anyway, as long as the big boss and the little boss were sitting on the stage, these people would not leave. This was the scene that Helly and Vivian saw when she came in. She could see no less than dozens of cameras being carried by people. The huge reception hall on the first floor was packed with people. Beligaju also saw Hellion Vivian. He curled his lips into a smile. And there was a kind of handsomeness that was like the melting of winter snow. He strode toward Hellion Wei Wei with his long legs. The media automatically made way for him. When they turned around, they realized that there was a woman standing not far behind them. The woman was holding a little boy's hand. Her lips were half curled, and she didn't show the slightest sign of stage fright in front of so many people. Instead, she looked handsome and free. The media had never seen a woman wearing a racing suit so beautifully. Half of her trousers were rolled up, revealing her slender ankles. The woman looked very fair, and there was a kind of beauty in full bloom. She had a head of waist-length chestnut curly hair. Her face was mostly covered by sunglasses, but it still couldn't hide the warmth that radiated from this person. She saw the media pointing their cameras at her, but she didn't panic. Instead, she took off her sunglasses and gave the reporters a faint smile. She was so beautiful. And this woman was very smart. Not only was she smart, but how many women could talk and laugh in front of so many cameras? Other than people in the entertainment industry, there were also those who were born into famous families. They were radiant from the moment they were born. However, it was obvious that this woman in front of them was not familiar to them, and they had never seen her on any occasion. "You're so late." Beligaju reached out and pulled her over. He put his hand on Hellion Vivian's waist as if there was no one else around, causing an uproar. The reporters began to frantically press the shutter button, wanting to capture this scene. Bailey Shangxia, who was originally very cool, was still tormenting his new manager. When he looked up and saw Qingchen, he walked over and took his younger brother from his mother. Then he rolled up Qingchen's drooping sleeves and reached out to hug her. Hellion Vivian didn't forget to look at the two little ones while talking to Beligaju. Seeing that Beligaju insisted on hugging Xiaobao, she smiled at Beligaju and said, "He misses Qingchen." Yes, he even said today that he wants the advertisers to give him a raise, so that he can earn tuition fees for Qingchen. As Beligaju spoke, he tilted his head and kissed Hellion Vivian's hair. His voice was very sexy as he said, "Shang Xie and I have been waiting for you guys for 2 hours." Knowing His Highness's temper, Hellion Vivian soothed him and said, "I'll compensate you later." Beligaju didn't say anything else, but the surrounding subordinates could see that he was very satisfied with the situation. Manager Li and the other senior executives of Juwei Group couldn't help but look at each other. The surprise in their hearts was written all over their faces. After all, in their hearts, the CEO Ju, who killed people without spilling blood in the business field, was really cold. They didn't expect that he would actually act coquettishly toward a woman. That's right, he was acting coquettishly. Although the man's tone and expression were particularly cold, that was the truth. Many senior media personnel heard this conversation and couldn't help but look at Hellion Vivian again. At first, they thought that Beligaju's relationship with Beligaju wouldn't be very good even if he announced his marriage. Otherwise, how could Beligaju not have a female companion by his side? Now they had to reevaluate this relationship. This was because Beligaju's every move was a declaration that the woman in his arms was very important to him and was unique. Someone couldn't help but sigh. "CEO Ju, we finally believe that you're really married." However, there were still people who were curious about the child Hellion Vivian brought over. The camera immediately turned to Qingchen. Because they were too complacent, they forgot to be careful. Bailey Shangxia stood in front of her younger brother. At such a young age, she was very oppressive. "Point your cameras at my father. My younger brother doesn't like to be photographed. Also, you can put my father's and my photos in any magazine today. But if anyone dares to publish my mother's and my younger brother's faces, I promise you that you won't be able to bear the consequences." Chapter 984. When Bailey Shangxia said this, the coldness in his eyes made many reporters shudder. They had only treated him as a child just now. Now they realized that the heir of Juwei Group was not an ordinary child. As if he was threatening them, he looked at their work cards and smiled. "Xinyue Media, Guangying Media, I'll remember your companies." Hearing this, The two reporters who had just taken a photo turned pale and looked at Manager Li. Manager Li still had a smile on his face, but his aura did not diminish at all. Since young Master Shangxia said so, please abide by the rules of Juwei Group and delete the photos of Madam and young Master. Otherwise, we will use commercial means. Hellion Vivian did not think it was a big deal to show her face. However, it was obvious that Beligaju acquiesced to Bailey Shangxia's actions. He even added with a smile, they should know what should be released and what should not. If they don't, there is no need for them to be in this industry. It was very contradictory, wasn't it? Since they did not want the photos to be released, why did they have to hold a press conference? Soon, the industry veterans came to a conclusion and asked Beligaju tentatively, CEO Ju, do you want to release the photos of you and Madam? Madam's face is not in the photos, only her back. Hearing this, Beligaju smiled. Which company are you from? Tang Enterprise Media. The media man adjusted his glasses. He was an elite, handsome, and very smart man. Beligaju's thin lips were still curled. He looked at the media man and instructed Manager Li, give him all the exclusive photos of Juwei Group in the future. Yes. Manager Li was stunned. The other reporters were even more surprised. They wondered what the other party had done to get all the exclusive photos of Juwei Group. Of course, there were also those who hated themselves for not making a move earlier. When those who were often in the industry heard the result, they completely understood what Bailey Jiaju wanted. He wanted to announce to the whole world that this woman was his, but he did not want others to see the treasure in his arms. They did not expect it to be like this. It had been a long time since such a man had appeared in the business circle. Any successful man would more or less be a womanizer. This was because they would always prefer those who were younger than them. The more money and power they had, the more they would do so. It was too easy to obtain them. No one could guarantee that they would be loyal for a lifetime. In this land, there were too many men who didn't really take true love seriously. He loved you this year, but he would fall in love with someone else next year. For someone like Bailey Jiaju, who was rich and powerful, and whose handsome side profile alone could make countless women submit to him, it was really rare to see a business emperor who cherished a person to such an extent. There was also another group of female reporters who focused their attention on Bailey Shangxia. If it was said that they had taken a liking to young Master's face in the beginning, they were now extremely attracted to young Master's brother complex, especially when he heard Qingchen say from behind Bailey Shangxia, brother, I brought you chocolate. Bailey Shangxia lowered his head and took it to eat. He did not forget to feed his brother a mouthful. When he wiped his brother's mouth, it made people want to open their WeChat moments and start scrolling. Unexpectedly, Bailey Shangxia won a group of anti-fans. In addition, these anti-fans were all in the media industry. It was destined that Bailey Shangxia would be very popular in this circle in the future. Hence, on the day the press conference ended, someone set up a brother complex team on Weibo. They wrote all the words that the demonic young master said to his brother into a short story. Coupled with Bailey Shangxia's extremely cool little face, it was simply piercing through people's hearts. No one posted a picture of Qingchen's face online. In fact, there was only one picture of her back. It was just that she was being carried by Bailey Shangxia, who was a head taller than her, and she was staggering forward. The focus was still on Bailey Shangxia. That little face of hers was extremely serious. Seeing such a picture, the netizens exclaimed, how can there be such a sensible brother? A brother complex for 100 years. It's said that young master entered this circle to earn money for his brother's school fees. So cute. No, I want to take her home and raise her. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's wait for young master's debut. For the entire day, the popularity of the words Juwei Group did not decrease from the internet. Beligaju was very satisfied with the commotion this time. In this way, some people should know who Weiwei belonged to. Hellion Vivian turned the steering wheel in her hand. After parking the car, she smiled and poked a certain highness's side face. You seem very happy. Beligaju did not deny it. He opened the door and got out of the car. Hellion Vivian liked a certain highness like this. When he was happy, he was really very handsome. Hence, she would not let him become a killing machine. Even if such a day really came, she would protect him. This man fell from heaven and became a demon for her. He tore apart time and space and lost his divinity. What reason did she have not to protect him? Even if she had to betray the whole world, she would stand by his side. Moreover, the worst-case scenario was that he would help her fulfill her wish and then devour her. As a person of Buddhism, Hellion Vivian could clearly see the demons behind him that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They were beginning to move. She sensed the subtlety of this because this time, a certain highness did not hold her hand. Instead, he stood there and looked at her with a faint smile. Hellion Vivian knew very well that that was the smile of a demon. But so what? Hellion Vivian tilted her head and took a step forward. Then, she held Baligaju's hand and said, "We bought a lot of groceries this time. Let's push the cart in." To be honest, Baligaju and Bailey Shangxia had never shopped in a supermarket. Therefore, when they walked in, the father and son frowned at the same time. It was rare that they did not dislike each other. Little Qingchen was already sitting in the trolley consciously. Usually, when he walked, he would sit in the trolley when he went to the supermarket, so that it would be more convenient for Hellion Weiwei to buy things. Bailey Shangxia saw his younger brother sitting in the cart. Without waiting for Hellion Vivian to say anything, he automatically took the cart. Bailey Shangxia's way of treating his younger brother was to throw whatever Qingchen wanted to eat into the cart in a row. Hellion Vivian held her forehead and said helplessly, "You bought too much." "It's okay." Baligaju was very calm. "We'll pay our own way. It's time for him to take some practical actions to support the family. How can he just talk about it?" Hellion Vivian. Chapter 985. Bailey Shangxia wasn't afraid that his sinister father would make him pay the bill himself. After all, he had just signed the contract and received a gold card from his manager. He could do whatever he wanted in the future. Hellion Vivian also pushed a cart. The two of them only liked to shop in the snack section. She brought His Highness to the place where she usually bought vegetables and meat. "What do you want to eat tonight?" Hellion Vivian asked the man beside her with a chuckle. Baligaju obviously had no experience in this place. He didn't understand why he had to do such an inefficient thing himself. However, when Hellion Vivian turned to ask him, it seemed that all his impatience had turned into something else. He looked at her hand and pursed his thin lips. "Whatever." Hellion Vivian smiled. "How about steak? You've always liked to eat beef. Shall I make it rare for you? Medium rare?" Baligaju nodded. There was a gentleness in his eyes that even he didn't know. He reached out and separated Hellion Vivian from the others who were shopping in the supermarket. At this time of the day, the people who came to the supermarket to buy groceries were basically aunties. Baligaju attracted a lot of attention the moment he appeared. After all, it wasn't suitable for him to appear here. Even though he was standing there to protect Hellion Vivian, he was still a shining figure that was difficult to ignore. "Did you see that? The person picking the steak in front is dressed in Armani. Aren't his legs too long? What a good figure. Do you want to hit on him? Hit on him. Don't you see that he already has a girlfriend? What a pity. But handsome men and beautiful women are so pleasing to the eye." Hellion Weiwei listened to the discussion of the girls beside her, tilted her head and smiled at them. The girl's heart softened. So beautiful and has a good personality. No wonder her man is so handsome." He was indeed handsome. Moreover, he was excessively young. He looked a little like a vampire aristocrat in the movies. There was a cold look in the corner of his eyes. Just looking at him made one's heart beat faster. Hellion Vivian knew how influential His Highness's face was, so she didn't let him stay here for long. After picking the steak, she took him to another place. "After making the steak, I'll make you a chocolate cake. You and your son love it. Just one piece is enough." Baligaju's voice was very indifferent. "Let them do the rest." Hellion Vivian. "Beauty Weiwei, Big Brother bought me yogurt. Do you want to drink it?" Hellion Vivian didn't look at the two little ones for a while, and found that the cart was already full. Qingchen sat on the pile of snacks, her eyes very beautiful. Bailey Shangxia said seriously to his younger brother, "The car is too small, it can't hold much. I'll buy it for you next time." Little Qingchen nodded as he struggled to stretch out his short legs. Helly and Vivian facepalmed. A cart full of snacks. Wasn't that too much of a wastrel? Thinking of this, Helly and Vivian glanced at Beligaju, indicating for him to do something about it. After receiving Helly and Vivian's gaze, Beligaju lowered his eyes and started to educate his son. His voice was very low, and had his usual indifference. Don't buy so many things in the future. Helly and Vivian was touched. After all, from the moment they entered the supermarket until now, His Highness had finally used the right way to educate his son. But it turned out that Helly and Vivian was moved too early, because His Highness' next sentence was his true purpose. It's troublesome to buy so many things. If you really like them, buy this supermarket, and take your time to choose. Bailey Shangshi's little face was very cool. Obviously, he didn't think that there was such a way. Now that he was reminded by his father, he immediately took out his small phone and called his agent. Help me buy a supermarket. The agent glared at him. What do you want me to buy? A supermarket. Bailey Shangshi's voice was indifferent. The bigger the better. The agent gasped. Just as he was about to shout out a stomach full of words, the other party had already hung up. The agent was unwilling to give up. He called back, but the other party didn't pick up. Instead, he received a short message. I'm with my younger brother, don't be noisy. The agent. Who's the one being noisy? Also, don't make buying a supermarket sound like it's as easy as buying ice cream, okay? Also, why did he have to look for him to buy things? Helly and Weiwei could imagine how pitiful her son's manager must be. But Beligaju gave Debao a look that said, you finally have the ability to analyze things on your own. This Helly and Vivian massaged her temples. She still had to educate her son. She pulled Bailey Shangxia over. It's too wasteful to buy a supermarket. Qingchen only likes a few things. He doesn't like most of the things here. Bailey Shangxia thought about it, and felt that his mother made sense. Then I won't buy it. Helly and Vivian was finally relieved. My younger brother likes to eat chocolate and potato chips. I'll ask the two manufacturers to buy it. Bailey Shangxia held his small phone coolly, and was about to make a call. Helly and Vivian. You'd better buy a supermarket. Beligaju seemed to like seeing Helly and Vivian's helpless look. He pulled her over and laughed softly. The vibration from his chest made her feel close and safe. Helly and Vivian laughed as well. She helped the man tidy up his hair. Her thin lips curved as she walked forward, and picked some fruits for the cake. Bailey Shangxia pushed Qingchen behind Helly and Vivian and Beligaju. His small figure was very tall and straight, and the scene was very cute. It was almost 5 o'clock when the family of 4 finished shopping in the supermarket. There were indeed too many things. Fortunately, Helly and Vivian drove a Wrangler, which was very spacious. Because she had to bring the 2 little ones, Helly and Vivian gave His Highness the car keys, and asked him to drive the car directly to the entrance of the large shopping mall. This way, they could directly get in the car, and didn't need to carry things for a long time. Because the underground parking lot didn't allow the supermarket's trolley, there was an elevator at the entrance of the shopping mall, which could be directly pushed up. His Highness had always been patient with Helly and Vivian. He took the car keys, and walked to the underground parking lot with one hand in the pocket of his suit pants. His deep facial features looked even more handsome in the dark. There were 2 girls in the elevator with him, and they were dressed very fashionably. When one of the girls saw him, her eyes lit up. After getting off the elevator, she saw Beligaju walking towards the Wrangler. She thought of a plan, and turned to the side to block in front of Beligaju's car. Sir, our car has been driven away. Can you send us to the exit? Can we take a taxi? Chapter 986. Choo-choo, what are you doing? The other girl pulled her arm, but she also agreed with her approach. After all, it would save a lot of effort to get someone to carry them up. Of course, the premise was that this gentleman was willing. The girl called Choo-choo was obviously not as simple as the other girl thought. She was pretty with big eyes and good skin. She was a young girl. She saw this man when she was shopping in the supermarket. At first she felt that it was a pity, but now that they met it was fate. As for whether he had a girlfriend, she didn't care at all. What's more, such a handsome and rich man. Anyone had the right to pursue him. He would only be hers if she really got him. Thinking of this, Choo-Choo bit her lower lip and said to Baligaju, "Sir, we don't want to trouble you. It's just that we bought too many things this time. It's very inconvenient for two girls to carry them out." Baligaju didn't say anything. He just sat in the car and looked at her. Choo-Choo felt that such a man had to rely on himself to take the initiative. She opened the back door and put her hands together. She was very cute. "Please, please. Sir, you just need to send us to the door." After saying that, she put the snacks in her hand on the back seat, looking delicate and pitiful. She thought that no man would refuse her in this way. Baligaju played with the car keys in his hand. His eyes were very light. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "You'd better take your things out of the car." Choo-Choo raised her eyebrows. It didn't matter that he was so cold. She still had a backup plan. "Sir, I know you are afraid that your girlfriend will misunderstand. We will explain to her later. We won't cause you trouble." Girls like Choo-Choo always felt that when dealing with men, as long as you were pure enough, good-looking, and knew how to act coquettishly, no one could bear to. This was the easiest first step to get close to a man. But obviously, she didn't understand what kind of person Baligaju was. Just when she thought that she had successfully hooked up with Shunfengcheng, Baligaju turned off the engine and said coldly, "Get lost." Choo-Choo was at a loss of what to do. Her entire body stiffened. She never thought that this would be the result. She stretched out her hand, wanting to tug on Baligaju's sleeve and act coquettishly. However, in the next second, Baligaju used an unknown object to cut open her neck. The thick smell of blood caused the originally thick hostility to spread to Baligaju's eyes. He looked at the girl in front of him and curled his thin lips into a faint smile. He was a demon through and through, always enjoying the taste of blood. He opened his mouth and gently licked the corner of his lips. Then he slowly lowered his head towards Choo-Choo. In that instant, Choo-Choo was completely dumbfounded. A huge sense of fear was like an invisible hand, tightly squeezing her heart. She wanted to shout, but she found that it was difficult for her to even make a sound. When the girl saw this scene, she trembled and was about to take out her phone to call the police. Monster! That was a monster! Who would have thought that such a man would suddenly make a move on a girl? Although that face was still impeccably handsome, especially when the hostility was pervading, Baligaju looked more like a handsome vampire who had walked out of a movie. However, the fear was real. Choo-Choo trembled as she listened to the man approach her and whisper, "Such a young body. The taste will definitely be very good." At that time, Choo-Choo really thought that she would be killed by the man. However, in the next second, the man stopped and looked at her with a picky gaze. "No, it's not that smell. As expected, I still can't tolerate the stench of a soul." With that said, the man swung his hand and threw her out. It was as if he was looking at a pile of trash, as if he disliked eating. The two girls hugged each other and looked at the scattered snacks on the ground. They began to regret provoking such a man. They didn't know what had happened. However, demons were the most susceptible to the mental state of humans. The more they challenged the three views, the more shameless they were, and the more selfish they were, the more they could arouse the demon's nature. The darkness brought out by the girl's thoughts was like a nourishment for the demon. In addition, Baligaju was stained with blood, which meant that he was really starting to want to devour souls. Almost before they got into the car, Helly and Vivian could feel the hostility coming from the Wrangler. How could this be? Why was it so heavy? Helly and Wei Wei furrowed her brows. Bailey Shangxia, who was taking care of his younger brother, also raised his head at this moment. A blood-red light flashed across his eyes. That was the effect between demons. She couldn't let Baligaju's demonic nature affect Shangxia. Little demons were immature and were the easiest to kill. This was Helly and Vivian's first reaction. Therefore, she gathered the spiritual aura in her body and turned to Bailey Shangxia. "Shangxia, take your younger brother back to the car. Don't go to the villa for the next few days, understand?" Bailey Shangxia realized that something was wrong, and so did Qingchen. However, the two of them knew that they couldn't help at this time, so they simply nodded obediently. Helly and Vivian looked at the Wrangler that stopped in front of her. The man inside was smiling. It was still him, but his eyes were dyed red. "Get in." He thought that Hellion Vivian would avoid him. He also hoped that Hellion Vivian would avoid him. But when his thoroughly cold fingers were grasped in someone else's hand, Bailey Jiaju somewhat stiffened. Not only was his thirsty appetite not suppressed, on the contrary, it made him very much want to eat this soul that belonged to him alive. There's blood on it. Hellion Vivian acted as if she didn't see the change in him. She wiped his fingers clean and then said, "Our son will go to the car shop later. The two of us will go back to the villa. What do you think?" Baligaju smiled. Very good. He didn't like anyone to disturb him. Hellion Vivian took back her hand. Then let's drive. It takes a long time to make steak. They didn't waste any more time. The Wrangler's performance was very good. When the car drove out, the lines were unusually smooth. Qingchen stood in the same place and looked at the Wrangler that disappeared into the traffic. His eyes dimmed. Bailey Shangxia reached out and held his hand. His thoughts were very clear. It was because of this that he knew why his mother wanted to send him and his younger brother away. His father was demonizing, a very serious demonization. It should be the side effect of tearing time and space. His father would devour souls like him, or even more so than him, because once his father's demonic nature was released, nothing could suppress it. Bailey Shangxia also knew that his mother was afraid that his father's demonic nature would affect him. The enchantment just now was the evidence. The only thing he could do now was to take care of his younger brother and stabilize the demon world. He didn't want them to be affected by his father and run around killing people. Bailey Shangxia held Qingchen's hand. The expression on his face was more serious than ever. Chapter 987. There was no sunlight in the villa all year round. Everywhere was filled with the faint fragrance of roses. The burgundy carpet was laid on the wooden floor, which made Bailey Jiaju's skin look even whiter. That kind of whiteness was sickly, but for a demon, it was a normal thing. Hellion Vivian was frying the steak in her hand, looking at the figures outside the window. She narrowed her eyes, and when she turned her head again, there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. "It's better to add some mint to the wine. I'll go out and get some." "Okay." Baligaju smiled as well. His fingers brushed his thin lips, and the evil aura in his eyes began to churn with black fog. The effect of the demonization was bound to attract the people from the three upper realms. At this time, the figure standing outside wanted to kill Baligaju before he was completely demonized. Although more than a dozen people from Tiandao were no match for Baligaju, there was still a loophole in Baligaju's body, and they had a chance to make a move. During the demonization, there would be an hour when Baligaju would lose his ability to fight, and that would be the best time for them. The alliance between Tiandao and Buddhism was not something that anyone could resist. However, when they saw the phoenix bone knife in front of them, everyone's expression changed. Hellion Weiwei was still wearing modern clothes, but as she slowly walked forward, illusory lotuses bloomed under her feet one after another. Amidst the gusts of wind from her blade, the crowd seemed to have seen the great Phoenix King, who cleared the sea of blood. At this time, she still had the possibility of becoming a Buddha. Soon, the people from the three upper realms realized that this was going to be a tough battle. The man in the Kasaya looked up at Hellion Vivian. "Phoenix, you shouldn't have stopped us. This time, we came for the righteous path of the three realms. The Emperor has begun to demonize. Do you want to see him become a murderous demon and destroy the three realms? It's better for everyone if you step aside now. It's better for everyone if you leave now." Hellion Vivian's voice was very cold, and the scimitar was surrounded by a fiery aura. The Voidwalkers immediately took a step back and looked at the woman in front of them. Only then did they realize that the phoenix standing in front of them didn't weaken after coming to the mortal realm. Instead, there was an unknown force supporting her, allowing her to not lose out to the Wisdom King of the Buddhist realm, who used to wield the scimitar. "Are we leaving or fighting?" The 5 simple words were filled with an irresistible aura. No one dared to approach within 500 meters of the saber. The Voidwalkers looked at Hellion Vivian and said in a deep voice, "You will regret this, Phoenix. What you have done is not only a betrayal of Buddhism, but also a betrayal of the three realms of human, God, and Buddhism. None of them will tolerate you. You have protected one person, but you have pushed everyone in the world into the abyss of hell. Is this how you repay the true Buddha when he brought you from Mount Buzhou to the world of Buddhism? Where do you think the people of the world are? Everyone who loves you will lose their lives because of your decision now. Do you really want to do this, Phoenix? The Voidwalkers roared the last two words. Hellion Weiwei listened to the other party's words, and her fingers tightened. Her voice was cold as she said, "If that day comes, I will leave this world with him. But before that, I will kill whoever comes." The Voidwalkers knew that they couldn't persuade Phoenix. It should be said that from the beginning, even the true Buddha couldn't persuade Phoenix. Phoenix's debt to the true Buddha had been repaid thousands of years ago. Now, it seemed that she was only protecting this one person. They had only seen such a phoenix when she cleared the sea of blood back then. At that time, she was covered in blood from head to toe with her saber on Mount Buzhou. No one could stop such a reckless phoenix. In order to repay Sakya's kindness, she became the Buddhist saber for thousands of years. She cleared the sins of the world and protected the righteous in the world. Now, in order to protect Beligaju, she was going to overturn everything. The Voidwalkers said, "You will regret it." But they never understood that this time, Hellion Vivian was willing to do it. Similarly, she was not lying. If such a day really came, it would be impossible. She would leave this world with Beligaju, but she would never tolerate anyone hurting him. The people of Tiandao knew that if this stalemate continued, there would be no consequences. The wind created by the rotation of Phoenix's bone saber was like a knife on their faces. They looked at each other and made a plan in their hearts. They had to retreat first. It was too difficult to deal with Phoenix by relying on Buddhism alone. They had to join forces with the people of Hades to attack together. Amitba. The Voidwalkers shook their heads and disappeared with the people of Tiandao. But it turned into a sigh. "Phoenix, why are you doing this? In the end, the only one who will be hurt is yourself." Hellion Vivian's back paused for a moment. She did not look back. Instead, she walked into the villa. As she closed the door, an invisible barrier rose behind her. The pure spiritual energy had the effect of purification. Although Hellion Vivian knew that purification was useless at this point, at least it could delay the time of Beligaju's demonization. "You're back." Bailey Jiaju leaned against the wall and looked at her lazily. He was swirling a glass of red liquid in his hand. His deep eyes were dyed red with blood. "Why didn't you let them take me away? Haha, what a stupid decision." It was obvious that he was going to demonize. At this time, no one would go near him. Beligaju laughed in his heart. His evil aura slowly surged out, echoing with the group of demons behind him. That kind of scene was like the blade of the greatest villain before he killed someone. It was terrifying and dazzling. Hellion Vivian looked at him and took a step forward. Suddenly, she hugged his waist and said in a low voice, "You're not stupid. Let's continue eating." Beligaju's body shook. The person in his arms was so warm. Compared to his cold body, when that person kissed him, it was so gentle. Hellion Vivian kissed him on the corner of his mouth. "At least finish the steak." Beligaju did not speak. The empty part of his chest was a little warm. His red eyes gradually faded, as deep as the sea. He seemed to have thought of something, but he couldn't remember anything. In his memory, there was a small figure standing on the snow-covered mountain Tenya. She was wearing a blood-red kasaya. She handed him a steamed bun with a cold face. At that time, he thought that it would be good if the small figure belonged to him. So, even after they grew up, he would always call her Little Phoenix in his heart. It was just strange that he couldn't remember what she really looked like. Chapter 988. The only thing that filled his mind was the thought of obtaining it. However, demons didn't have hearts. The only thing that could make Beligaju chase after her was her scent. Presumably, her blood must be very sweet. Also, her soul seemed to be very delicious and smelled very sweet. Smelling the faint fragrance at the tip of his nose, Beligaju closed his eyes as if he was intoxicated. He stretched out his arm to hold her waist, and the tip of his tongue seductively licked his thin lips. His fangs seemed to be gently rubbing against Hellion Vivian's neck, as if he was teasing her. He had to admit that he liked this smell. He liked it very much. He almost couldn't wait to tear her apart. However, just as he was about to bite her neck, she hugged him tightly. That person hugged him tighter and buried her face in his neck. Her voice was a little hoarse. Don't stand here. The sun is strong here. It's not good for you. Even if you want to eat me, this is not a good choice. Baligiju paused. She knew that he wanted to devour her. Usually, the souls that he devoured would either scream in fear or be confused by him and wrap around him like they were begging for sex. But obviously she was different. She was protecting him. And very soberly, she used the tip of the knife to cut her wrist and then pulled him into the darkness. She touched his hair with one hand and put her wrist in front of him. That pair of clear eyes were like the stars in the night. Drink. Baligiju didn't immediately act because he felt very comfortable. Her hand gently played with his hair like she had never been in contact with anyone before. Her hands were very soft and tender and successfully blocked the thirst that surged out of his throat. Bang! Bailey Jiaju took a deep breath and pushed her away. He turned on the shower in the bathroom and immersed himself in the scalding hot water. After his silver-gray hair was wet, it hung on the side of his ears, blocking all of his expressions. Hellion Vivian stood outside the door and looked at his blackened nails. Her eyes darkened. Baligiju seemed to be enduring a great pain, but that pain soon disappeared. He grabbed his collar with one hand, and when he looked up, his lips curled into a smile. His dark eyes were like a dream, gradually forming an invisible vortex, as if he wanted to devour everything in the world. The supreme demon king of the demon world. There was no one else who could captivate all living things more than him, free and unrestrained. When he had fallen from the heavens, he had been supported, hunted down, and infatuated by countless people. Now he just wanted to taste what the person standing in front of him tasted like. The problem was that the other party was his exclusive soul. Strangely enough, he was unable to determine what the other party wished for. It was rare for Baligiju to be perplexed, but then he laughed evilly. Hellion Vivian looked at his wet appearance and didn't think too much. She picked up a white towel from the side, tiptoed and covered his head. Baligiju took the opportunity to grab her waist and pressed his other hand on her injured wrist. Just like that, he pressed her against the wall. His breath was constantly changing, because the person in front of him was suppressing it, but also because of his thirst, he wanted to tear something apart. Demonization was very painful, but resisting it was 10,000 times more painful. Hellion Vivian couldn't bear to see her highness suffer, so she moved her wrist and put it on his lips. At that moment, Baligiju's muscles tightened, and he couldn't resist the burning in his throat. He lowered his head and bit the slender white wrist in front of him. The sweet blood melted on the tip of his tongue. It was the most wonderful soul he had ever tasted. This was the taste. This was the taste he really wanted. Demons weren't like vampires. They didn't need a lot of blood, but the blood from the soul could relieve a lot of their pain and let them confirm the taste of the soul. But everything was in chaos. Such a wonderful taste made Baligiju a little unable to control himself. He reached out and tore the cloth on Hellion Vivian's body. He pressed his palm on Hellion Vivian's waist and kept sucking on her wrist. He couldn't help but drink a few more mouthfuls. As a demon, he knew very well that he shouldn't eat souls like this, but the gaze of the person in his arms looking at him made him want to swallow her whole body into his stomach. Baligiju was very dissatisfied that he only tasted this little bit, but he couldn't really suck her dry. What he wanted was her soul. It was a complete soul. When Baligiju thought of this, he stopped and looked at the pale and colorless person under him. He didn't know why, but his originally empty chest seemed to have been filled with the northwest wind. It was wet and cold. Suddenly, his pupils shrank, and he quickly picked up Hellion Vivian. For the first time in his life he panicked. His fingers tore the white cloth and wrapped Hellion Vivian's wrist. When the blood couldn't be seen, he reached out and pressed his forehead. He said in a deep voice, "You go to the car dealership, I want to stay alone for a while. Get up tomorrow, no leave today, I'll go pack up now." Hellion Vivian couldn't leave, so she refused directly. "Wherever you go, I'll be there." Heh, Baligiju chuckled, pinched Hellion Vivian's chin, and began to talk nonsense. "Hellion Vivian, When did you learn how to pester other women? I said I was very annoyed and wanted to be quiet for a while. Hellion Vivian stood up, looked at him, and didn't give in at all. She only said 3 words. I'm not going. Beligage's fingers tightened, and his eyes fell on her wrist wrapped in white cloth, and his voice became colder. What's the use of you staying here? Do you want to stop me from hunting? As long as it's my blood, you won't be demonized so quickly. Hellion Vivian pressed her furry head against his chest. And I want to accompany you, it's that simple. Beligaju resisted the urge to hug her, and smiled evilly. Phoenix, you haven't changed at all. You're so stupid. Who do you really think will be by your side for a lifetime? Without Buddhism, Phoenix will definitely be vulnerable. It seems that all my inferences are right. If it weren't for you, those useless people from the upper realm would have rushed in, and I wouldn't have evolved to such a perfect state. But if you stop me from going out, it will only make people feel disgusted. To put it bluntly, I want to go out now to hunt and find a fresh girl. I don't want to drink your blood anymore. Phoenix, you're no longer useful to me. Chapter 989. Is that so? Hellion Vivian raised her head and looked at him. With a flick of her wrist, the prayer beads wrapped around her wrist immediately turned into a scimitar and directly slashed at her left hand. Clang! Hellion Vivian's hand was not cut. Instead, Beligaju's entire body surged with demonic aura and blocked the phoenix scimitar with one arm. His face was gloomy. What are you doing? Didn't you say that you don't need my blood? I'm just experimenting. Hellion Vivian's voice was very faint. As soon as her voice fell, she pounced on the man and pressed Beligaju's entire body under her body, her small face buried in his chest. Since I'm not important, why are you stopping me? Beligaju's blood-red eyes looked at the ceiling. His hands were placed on both sides of him and firmly pressed against the floor. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. Because if he didn't do that, he would definitely not be able to resist hugging her, locking her in his embrace, and then continuously hurting her. This person, why couldn't this person be like others and let him fend for himself? Why did she have to be so good to him? So good that he didn't even want to let go. I just don't want to force myself to drink blood that I don't like. You should also know that I can pounce on anyone I see now. Your experiment has no meaning at all. Even if it was another woman, it would be the same. Beligaju laughed, his gaze cold. Also, I don't like people touching me. You better leave me now. Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes and looked at him. After becoming a demon, will people become stupid? Or do you really think that I'm stupid and can't see anything? Beligaju, are you looking down on me? If you want me to leave you, you can just kill me. There's no need to say so much. Phoenix, when are you going to stop being so self-righteous? Beligaju's voice turned cold. Hellion Vivian's expression was calm. Then just treat me as self-righteous. I'm the most suitable person to stay by your side. Others will only speed up your demonization. It's going to be dark soon. After dark, it's the most difficult. Don't think that you can chase me away and then go hunting by yourself. I want to watch you. Beligaju opened his mouth. Hellion Vivian blocked him with one sentence and was very imposing. Shut up. If you talk nonsense, I'll take off all your clothes. Even if you go out, you'll be naked. Hellion Vivian's words were somewhat unreasonable. Bellion, he reached out and hugged her. He wanted to ask her, what about you? What about you? What? After demonization, no one would want to be near him. This person was still so stupid. Bailey Jiaju bit Hellion Weiwei's neck ferociously, but he did not break her skin. Instead, he patiently and gently kissed her skin. His voice was deep. Phoenix, you're really stupid. You've been so stupid since you were young. I was born from the chaos. Not a god, not a demon, and not even a human. Why did you have to throw me a steamed bun, a vegetarian steamed bun? People from the chaos only eat meat. Don't you know that? If I didn't eat, you would visit me every day. You're the stupidest person in the entire Mountain Tinya. Look at that time. No one dared to approach me. But you were so stupid that you left after putting on a steamed bun. When you walked toward me in your kasaya, it was already foreshadowing that you would be this stupid. You're attacking my intelligence again. Hellion Vivian reached out and hugged him tightly. His face was reflected in her eyes. She touched him with her fingers and smiled gently with some pride. I hate it when people reject me. If you don't eat, I will feed you every day. Later you left. When we met again, you were a member of Tian Dao. Very arrogant. I wanted to snatch you from Buddhism a long time ago. Those old bald donkeys in Buddhism were not willing to let you go at all. However, you carried the wooden bucket and watered the Bodhi tree by yourself. If it were me, I would definitely not let you do these things, nor would I lock you in those dirty wooden huts and make you copy those complicated scriptures. You should be locked up with the most beautiful jewel chain. Those people have no taste at all. At this time, Baligaju's voice sounded particularly pleasant. Demons were born with a bewitching sex appeal. As long as he wanted, it seemed that he could capture anyone. His fingers ran down Hellion Vivian's hair and dyed it black bit by bit. His eyes lowered. If I want to eat you next time, take your phoenix knife and stab it directly into my chest. Those people in Tian Dao and Buddhism always want to destroy me, but they never know that the only one who can really kill me is you. Remember, when I'm eating, I'm the most vulnerable. That's the best time to do it. Now knock me out first, because I want to kill too much. You don't want to see me lose my mind. Hellion Vivian did not reject Baligaju's request this time. Now Baligaju's breath was very chaotic and unstable. Hellion Vivian only needed to use a little skill to make him faint. At night, the darkness in the heart of the bustling city would be completely released. This was the demon's favorite energy source. All dirty thoughts originated from the human heart. Everyone who hid behind the internet would find a way to release their stress when they could not find a way to vent during the day. Snatching boyfriends, keeping mistresses, back and forth in the workplace, comparing and ostracizing in school. Behind all these bustling activities were the nutrition of demons. Hellion Vivian was very clear that Baligaju could not stay in the villa anymore. She wanted to go to a place with fewer people, the fewer the better. Almost without any hesitation, she used Baligaju's phone to call Azure Dragon and asked him to drive the private jet to the villa and not approach. Hellion Vivian put the sleeping Baligaju into the pure black coffin that originally existed in the villa. The coffin was purified with Buddha beads around it. Demons did not need to breathe. The rose petals were scattered around Bailey Jiaju's body. His sleeping appearance was more innocent than any angel. His hands were placed in front of him, and his nose was straight. He was quiet and beautiful. Hellion Vivian leaned over and kissed him on the lips. She had never told him. That little phoenix wanted to talk to him. So she threw meat buns to him time and time again. In fact, she had done this many times when she was in Buddhism. But only this one person gave her a response. Compared to those who saw her as a scourge, this young man with a straight back never showed her any malice, although he was very arrogant. But this did not stop Hellion Vivian from throwing meat buns to him for the second time. Chapter 990. When she was the Wisdom King of Phoenix, Hellion Vivian never knew what happiness was. Her hands were stained with blood, and she was not tolerated by Buddhism. Every time she returned to the Hall of Great Strength, people would avoid her because of the blood on her. She often did not understand why she was alive. She did not have the heart to save all living beings. Therefore, the older she grew, the more bored she was. She did things she did not like day after day. She had no friends, no one to talk to, and no freedom. She only had the supreme position of Buddha. She did not understand the compassion of all living beings that the Venerable said. Now she looked at the person in the coffin. She finally understood. If there was really something to be touched, it was because of such a person that it became noisy. Therefore, she would never hand him over to anyone. Hellion Vivian reached out and closed the coffin. Then, she called young Master Tang and went straight to the point without any preamble. I need a batch of fresh blood. It's best to get it from a regular hospital through blood donation. Did something happen to you? The man on the sofa stood up. He was dressed in a military uniform and looked at the night view outside the window. Is it related to your man? Hellion Vivian did not hide it. She paused for a moment and said, I'll solve it myself. Hearing her words, the man did not ask more. His voice was very calm. What blood type do you want? I'll call and ask them to get a box of blood from the hospital. I don't want blood from the blood bank. I want blood from a donation. That kind of blood will not be too bad. Hellion Vivian paused and said, I'm going to the Tibetan area. I need a local to pick me up. I understand. The man flicked the cigarette in his hand and said in a very pure voice, I'll ask the people over there to prepare the blood bag. But Weiwei, I want to know how long you'll be there, so that I can be more prepared. Hellion Vivian knew that she was a little panicked this time. Fortunately, young Master Tang reminded her. She stabilized her breath and began to think carefully. At least 10 days, at most a month. I don't know the details. There will be 2 of us, including me. It's best that we won't be disturbed where we are going. All right, fly directly to the address below. The advantage of having a private jet was that he could avoid a lot of investigations and go directly to where he wanted to go. However, the place that Hellion Vivian went to this time was the largest uninhabited area in China. Qinghai Kiki Shili, Level 1 Nature Reserve, snowline 3,000 meters. The terrain was high and the temperature was extremely low. Even Tibetans rarely lived in this area. Hellion Vivian looked back at the coffin on the plane. This time, they didn't bring the pilot. Hellion Vivian flew the plane herself. When the plane landed, the Tibetan antelopes drinking water by the lake seemed to be frightened and began to run wildly. However, this did not affect Hellion Vivian at all. She opened the cabin door, and a person dressed like a Tibetan immediately ran over. The man was wearing a thick blanket and a hat on his head. He had one hand on the top of his head and his left hand on his chest. When he saw Hellion Weiwei, he smiled and said, Tashi delay. The Tibetan's voice was very loud, and it always made people feel better. Hellion Vivian took off the earphones on her head, looked at him and smiled. Tashi Deli. To be honest, I really didn't expect to get business in this season. The Tibetan looked at Hellion Vivian's clothes and said in stiff Chinese, You'd better wear more clothes. It's too cold here. The highest temperature is 5 degrees below zero. You definitely can't stand it. My name is Tashi. You can call me that in the future. At this time, no one will go to the mountain. You need a local guide, but the wind is too strong today and it's too late. Hellion Vivian walked to the cabin door, and her smile did not change. Thank you, Tashi, but forget about the guide. Young Master Tang should have told you. I'm going to the coldest side now. I'll drink the milk tea later. I have a luggage that looks a little big. I hope you can calm down when you see it. Don't be surprised and don't scream. Receiving business at this time, Tashi already knew that this would be a strange customer. After all, the people who came to Hozil were not normal. It was easy to lack of oxygen here, and there were very few people. It was difficult to know if there was any danger. Okay. Tashi looked at Hellion Vivian calmly. But you must bring the tent up the mountain, and the sled dogs. They can still play a role. Hellion Vivian nodded. I'll bring the tent, but I don't need the sled dogs. I have a Tibetan Mastiff. It can help me. Tibetan Mastiff? Tashi looked around. Where was the Mastiff? Hellion Vivian moved her fingers and chanted a spell. Her voice was low. Little Black, come out. Tashi was still looking for the Tibetan Mastiff when he saw a black hound walking out from the depths of the cabin. Its body was surprisingly big, probably because the color of its fur was too pure. When it stood in the dark, it seemed that its body was emitting a thick black fog. Was there a Tibetan Mastiff that big? Tashi was puzzled. He had seen a lot of Tibetan Mastiffs, and there were a few at home, but he had never seen such a big one. I brought it here. Blackie has a good personality. You can put all the food I want on its back. Hellion Weiwei said as she walked closer to it. At this time, Zhashi finally saw clearly what she was pulling behind her. His expression suddenly changed, but he did not say anything. Instead, he took out a rope and handed it to Hellion Weiwei. Do you want to use this? The iron chain is too cold to hold in your hand. No. Hellion Vivian smiled. Young Master Tang is right. You are very professional. Tashi looked at the pure black coffin again. Many people come here for sky burials, but this is the first time I see someone bringing a coffin. To be honest, it's quite scary. But you Han people have always been more meticulous than us. You probably want your friend to leave in a better state. Hellion Vivian stroked the coffin with her fingertips. He is not gone. He is sleeping. Maybe you can see him in the future. Tashi did not take Hellion Vivian's words seriously. In his opinion, Hellion Vivian just could not accept the death of her friend. After all, even the Tibetans knew that no one could be locked in a coffin and still be alive, unless the corpse came back to life. However, pure Tibetans had always been kind. Their true god Allah taught them not to blaspheme any soul, even if it was already dead. Chapter 991. Zhaxi carefully prepared everything that needed to be prepared. What this guest wanted the most was meat and wine, and then some harmful fruits, and a large barrel of pure water. These things were all placed on a raft, and then a rope was tied around the Tibetan mastiff's body, so that it could carry these things forward. There was only a box of things, but Zhaxi did not know what it was. When he pushed Hellion Vivian away, he said in stiff Chinese, "This was sent by young Master Tang's people. It has just arrived in the tent. Do you want to take it?" "Yes, I need it very much. Thank you, Zhaxi." The work of binding was done by Hellion Vivian. After all, no matter how bold Zhaxi was, he could not help but feel afraid when he saw the magic dog. After everything was ready, Hellion Vivian's fingers clenched the iron chain and walked into the endless Hozil. The snowline of the plateau was white and misty. Every line on the continent symbolized the unique fierceness and strength of ethnic minorities. But what Zhaxi did not expect was that Hellion Vivian did not sit on the wooden board like those who came to travel in the past. Instead, she walked in front of the black magic dog and put the hood of her coat on her head, only revealing her beautiful eyes. Such a person stood in the darkness, her dark windbreaker fluttering in the wind. Her steps were steady as she walked on the ice field. Her left hand was wrapped in pure white bandages, and her right hand was pulling on the iron chain. Her entire body seemed to be shrouded in a black fog that could not be dispersed. She was arrogant and omnipotent. Zhaxi scratched his head. He always felt that such a person was really rare. But the taboo of doing business with customers was curiosity. So, Zhaxi did not say anything more and turned to enter the tent. He had to welcome a small number of plateau explorers tomorrow. Hellion Vivian walked to the edge of the cliff and looked at the towering mountain peak in the distance, which was surrounded by wind and snow all year round. Without wasting any time, she began to bend down and set up the tent. Then, she put the coffin into the tent. At that moment, countless red spider lilies bloomed one after another, forming a strange and grand scene. Like a raging fire, every flower was in full bloom, delicate and alluring, carrying the fragility of the early morning, yet enchanting to the extreme, making people feel that they were extremely beautiful. Hellion Vivian's eyes darkened. She knew very well what the blossoming of the bouquet of death meant. However, none of this could stop what she was going to do next. Hellion Vivian opened the wooden box, her eyes still cold. If Zhaxi knew what was inside, he would definitely be scared to the point where his face would turn white. She reached for 2 bags and placed them in the glacier outside the tent. Then, she lit the portable stove and added a piece of wood to it. When it was about time, Hellion Vivian pushed open the black coffin. The man inside was still sleeping peacefully. On his chest, a gorgeous datura flower bloomed. There were so many flowers, but only that one was deep red, as deep as blood. 2 sharp fangs protruded from his thin lips. That was a face that could turn all living things upside down. It was noble, elegant, and a work of God. He just lay there quietly, his slender hands slightly crossed, elegantly folded in front of his chest. His long and thick eyelashes fell down, forming a shadow. He looked like an innocent angel. But Hellion Vivian knew that he was not an angel. The fangs of the devil had been revealed. When this person woke up again, no one could guarantee what would happen. Hellion Vivian leaned against the coffin and slowly closed her eyes. She needed to rest, because only by ensuring that she had enough strength to deal with what was coming next. After a night of flying, Hellion Vivian quickly fell into a light sleep. When she woke up again, it was already 6 o'clock in the morning. There were only sporadic sparks left on the bonfire, and the surroundings were dark and silent. Vaguely, she seemed to be able to smell the scent of blood at the tip of her nose. It was very strong, Hellion Vivian immediately stood up and looked behind her. The black coffin was empty, but there were many empty blood bags in the tent. One by one, they were labeled with the blood type and the person's name. Hellion Vivian frowned and walked out of the tent. The thin fog on the plains had begun to fade, leaving only a vast expanse of white and green. It was a sign that the sun was about to rise. Baligaju sat on the glacier, his sleeves like flowers blooming against his fair wrists. He held a blood bag in his mouth, his eyes slightly narrowed, enjoying the pleasure of drinking. Although the taste of the blood was not the best, but he was unusually hungry and needed to fill something with blood. He saw Hellion Vivian walking over, and his thin lips curved into a devilish smile. His white fangs were slightly exposed, and there was a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Fortunately, there was no one in Hozil. Otherwise, with Baligaju's appearance, anyone who saw it would cause an unexpected panic. He was still so handsome that people couldn't move their eyes away, but that sickly skin and slightly curved lips couldn't hide the evil. Human. Hellion Vivian noticed Baligaju's excitement, but the excitement of demons was always different from that of ordinary people. When they first entered the world, they were as pure as an angel with small black wings. In the end, after being muddled, they learned the human's obsession and greed incisively and vividly. So demons had all kinds of forms, but they were as elegant as magicians. They were evil to the bone, and people fell into it without knowing it. It smells so good. Baligaju threw the blood bag in his hand to the side. His voice was slightly low, his eyes looked at Hellion Vivian, and the tip of his tongue licked his lips. Hellion Vivian's heart sank. Had it already begun? She had completely lost her memory. Her Highness had forgotten about her. The weather outside was bitterly cold, and when the wind blew on her face, it was so cold that it hurt. Hellion Vivian's fingers were stiff for a long time before she recovered. She didn't touch the knife, but picked up the blanket on the side and walked over. It's cold here. Next time when you come out, remember to wear something. Baligaju's eyes were deep. He looked at Hellion Vivian who was approaching him, and reached out to pull her into his arms. His voice was evil. So it's my master, no wonder it tastes so good. But what do you want to do by bringing me to this place? Stop me from hunting? Heh, you're really naive. In a place where there is no one, my body's aura can delay the spread of the demon in your body. Hellion Vivian looked at him without hiding. There is no human in a radius of hundreds of miles. No one will affect you, and you don't have to think about hunting everywhere. The blood bags in the tent are enough for you to drink for 7 days. Now come with me first. Chapter 992. Hellion Weiwei glanced at him and said, "Don't try to lie to me. We can have hostility between us, and we can test each other, but don't put on an act in front of me. If you want to make me happier, put on the blanket." With that, Hellion Vivian stood up and hugged him again. This time, she wrapped him in the blanket and looked at him calmly. It was the first time that Bailey Jiaju met a woman who could ignore his sexiness. He laughed in a deep voice. Then, he bent down and put his thin lips next to her ear. "Your body obviously likes me. I can feel it." Hellion Vivian looked up and said slowly, "Then, do you feel that even my heart likes you?" Bailey Jiaju curled his thin lips and mocked the world. "You want to discuss love with me? That kind of illusory thing. Only stupid humans would be deceived by it. My master, as long as you lie down obediently, I can let you enjoy the supreme happiness." As soon as he finished speaking, he kissed her behind her ear. Every inch of his lips carried a unique coldness. Hellion Vivian's body trembled, and she wanted to push him away. Unfortunately, the man knew her every sensitive point, and Baligaju enjoyed the current position very much, especially when he kissed her neck with blood on his lips. That feeling was wonderful. Even the best virgin blood didn't give him such an intoxicating feeling. Every inch of her skin was trembling, every blood vessel was boiling, and every cell seemed to be slightly restless. Bailey Jiaju lowered his eyes and looked at her slightly trembling shoulders. Guji, she could make him excited. Indescribable excitement. He was thinking about how to devour her later. Maybe he should press her under his body. He liked to see the pain humans showed when they were happy. so ruthlessly invade and love, let her cry under him, and even beg for mercy. Thinking of this, Bailey Jiaju used his strength and pressed Helian Weiwei tightly into the tent. His nimble tongue overbearingly pried open her pink lips and swept across every inch of land that belonged exclusively to him. That was intolerable and irresistible heat, with the temptation of absolute aggression. Until Helian Vivian's whole body was weak, and she was panting, the man let go of her slightly. His ivory fingers skillfully untied the blanket wrapped around her, and gently stroked it down slowly. Lowering his head, his kiss fell on Helian Vivian's collarbone. His big palm lifted her up, and the tip of his tongue lingered slowly. He was not in a hurry, and seemed to be enjoying it. His skills could even make an ascetic goddess fall head over heels for him. It was recorded in the Bible. The temptation of the devil was invincible. When Bailey Jiaju felt the soft and smooth body under his palm tremble, the corner of his mouth raised slightly, so he was more presumptuous. He wanted to get more of her shy reaction. More. Helian Vivian knew that it was really difficult to refuse this man, but she still steadied her mind in the end. She pressed him with one hand, looked at him lightly, and said with a commanding tone, "I just want to see the sunrise, and you should need to drink another bag of blood." Baligaju stopped kissing. "My master, you are really smart. Devils are best at hunting when they are happy. I don't want to be eaten by you now." Helian Vivian pulled his fingers over and held them. "You don't have to think of ways to confuse me. I will tell you that wish when it is time to tell you." Baligaju knew that he was trapped. The eternal contract was originally like this. Before the time was up, the devil was not necessarily advantageous. But under normal circumstances, no one could resist his temptation. In the end, it was a wish that he could not pry into. Baligaju clenched his fingers, and there was uncontrollable hostility in his eyes. It seemed that this time, it would take some time to deal with this prey. When the time was up, he must completely tear her apart. After all, no one liked the feeling of being trapped. Especially Baligaju, who was a devil. Above the snow line, when the sun rose, it could almost illuminate the whole Hozil. That kind of beauty could not be described with words. Helian Vivian was still wrapped in a blanket, and her back was against Baligaju's chest. When the sun was really shining, she pulled down the tent and pushed Baligaju into the shadow. "Now you can't see the sun. What do you want to eat? I will make breakfast and bring it in." "Me." Baligaju raised his chin and pointed to the blood bag on the ground. "That." Helian Vivian paused. "There are other food besides blood. Since you know that I am a devil, don't expect me to live like a human, my naive master." Baligaju had a faint sneer at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he was unhappy because he had to stay here. Helian Vivian looked back at him. "There is your favorite chocolate. It has nothing to do with whether you are a devil or not." Baligaju didn't speak again. After Helian Vivian walked out of the tent, she took a deep breath, and then prepared breakfast. Jashi was a very professional guide. He even knew very well what people needed most in this area. The other party was even considerate enough to fill the wooden box with beef that the locals liked to eat, as well as some unknown medicines that were used to deal with altitude sickness. On the snowy mountains of Hozil, the most common thing was lack of oxygen. Baligaju was fine, but Helian Vivian, who took out all her spiritual energy to stabilize Baligaju, became like an ordinary person. Her physical fitness had always been better than others. After all, she had undergone special training. Even if she had some breathing difficulties, she could adjust herself. But at this time, she couldn't take oxygen. Once she got used to taking oxygen, she couldn't do without it. Helian Vivian knew that she had another tough battle to fight. Of course, she did everything to the best of her ability. But here, no matter how tough Helian Vivian was, she had to adapt to it. Chest tightness and breathing difficulties were common phenomena on the plateau. Helian Vivian patted her chest twice, adjusted her breathing, and then carried the can into the tent. It was portable travel equipment that could heat up bread and milk in a short time. Even if Baligaju didn't eat it, Helian Vivian still made two, but she replaced the milk with blood, and the rest with chocolate. Helian Weiwei extended her hand and pushed it in front of Bailey Jiaju. She smiled and said, "Go ahead and eat." After you finish eating, go to the coffin and lie down. It's not good for your health if you come out during the day. Is it fun for you to do this? The corners of Bailey Jiaju's mouth revealed a charming arc, but the words he spoke were like ice, extinguishing the warmth in the room. May 6, 2016, 2140 Update 1. Moi. Chapter 993. Trapping me here and not letting me go anywhere. I won't let you go. You know very well in your heart that I haven't done anything to you, because the devil's contract hasn't expired yet. Dying early or dying late is not the same. My master, you should be feeling very uncomfortable right now. Using all your spiritual energy to suppress the demonic nature in my body. Aren't you afraid that before the time is up, I will kill you with my own hands? Hellion Vivian looked up and said two simple words. I'm not afraid. Baligaju stood in the dark corner, and the fog continued to surge out from his body, indicating that he had begun to lose his patience. Hellion Vivian knew that what he said was true. Taking a deep breath, she directly picked up the cup, put it to his lips, and then drank it. Blood and soul had never been rejected by demons. The cold and sticky liquid in his mouth slowly slid across his gums, and every pore on his body was frantically opening and closing, desperately absorbing the nutrients in the liquid. This was Baligaja's current nature. He narrowed his eyes in enjoyment, and his white fingers seemed to be more transparent than the sky. Originally, there was an evil look on his handsome face, but now, because of the contrast of blood, it was full of demonic nature. He raised his head with the blood bag in his mouth, and his silver hair grew longer and longer, covering the ground. The second step of demonization. Baligaju's pair of eyes that had long been dyed red stared at Hellion Vivian, who was sitting on the ground opposite him, dark and gloomy, deep and confused. He knew that the hidden crazy gene in his blood was awakening, but he didn't understand why this person was so protective of him. She was clearly about to be swallowed up. So why did she look like it didn't hurt or itch? Are you cold? She reached out and hugged him again, like a cockroach that couldn't be killed, and looked at him very seriously. Baligaja's gaze landed on Hellion Vivian's pale lips. You're the one who's cold, my master. You seem to have forgotten that I'm a demon. Demons don't sense any body temperature. Hellion Vivian was very honest with him. Just like you said, I used my spiritual energy to suppress you. Naturally, you would experience altitude sickness. But it's better to be cold than to lack of oxygen. This land is the most beautiful place in our country. Some people come here before they die to have a sky burial. When I was very young, my father cheated on me, and my mother committed suicide. My inheritance was taken away from me, and my father sent me to school out of guilt. I've never liked going abroad, and I always felt that it was too lonely to stay there. After I met young Master Tang, I heard him talk about the plateau and snow mountains, so I really wanted to come and take a look. If you go further down, there are many vultures that feed on human flesh. If my soul is eaten by you, you can bury me here. I don't want to go back. Your body is also mine. Baligaju's eyes were filled with displeasure. It's better to be eaten by me than by those messy things. Hellion Vivian chuckled. You're right. Then can I hug you to sleep? I took care of you all day yesterday, and I'm a little tired. You don't have any body temperature, so you should feel more comfortable hugging me. Baligaju didn't refuse Hellion Vivian this time, because demons had a strong attachment to their masters. Moreover, as she said, Baligaju didn't like the low temperature here. If he could sleep with a warm body, at least it would be better than sitting on the side. Seeing that he agreed, Hellion Vivian dragged the blanket over, then wrapped the two of them, and lay in the soft coffin together. Outside the tent, only the cold wind could be heard. It was probably snowing, so everything was very quiet. Hellion Vivian tightened the blanket again, nestled in Baligaja's arms, and softly hummed a song. If heaven and earth are really worth singing about, it's also because of you that it's so noisy. The big world is more hazy than you think. I don't have the heart to fool you anymore. I hope you can understand. Looking at the three realms, you can't find a second person like this. Baligaju listened to the coldness in his ears, and reached out to hug Hellion Vivian in his arms. He thought that this would probably be the first soul that he could remember after he ate her. He should have found a treasure. No matter what she did, she wouldn't be annoying. Moreover, her voice was very pleasant to listen to, making people feel comfortable. She was very smart. She knew to prepare so much blood, and then bring him to the empty depths of the glacier. This had a very good effect on suppressing his demonic nature. However, these were the things that he hated the most. He thought about why he had found such a soul in the first place, making him feel irritated even when he touched her. Irritated? Such emotions were something that he rarely felt anymore. Thousands of years ago, he looked at the world with eyes colder than God, and he could do whatever he wanted. However, soon he was tired of power, tired of the world, tired of the night, tired of others bowing to him. He was not a human. In his dictionary, there was never the words birth, old age, illness and death, let alone the Buddhist words of resentment, unrequited love, and parting with love. It was better to eat the food as soon as possible. Baligaju licked his thin lips, and a faint light rose in his eyes. Hellion Vivian also realized something. She suddenly opened her eyes and stood up. You stay here, I'll go out and take a look. The people of Buddhism are here, I can smell their breath. Baligaju blocked in front of her. Do you think I will let you go out like this? Let you join forces with them to deal with me? It's daytime now. If you betray me, I will be in trouble. Hellion Vivian smiled. Just when he didn't understand why she was smiling, she had already tiptoed and kissed him on the lips. Wait for me to come back. Baligaju wanted to hold the woman's wrist. At that moment, even he didn't know whether he was worried that she would betray him, or that she would leave and never appear again. But soon he smiled. As long as the time was up, the contract would take effect. No matter where his mistress ran to as a demon, he would be able to sense her presence and eat her. So there was no need to worry at all. Thinking of this, Baligaju tightly grasped the blood bag in his palm. Clang! The teacup was smashed into pieces. Baligaju held his forehead with one hand, and blood dripped from his fingertips to the ground. Then, there was a low laughter, like the demon's Sanskrit, echoing in the tent. That's good. If she doesn't come back and chooses to betray or run away, I can immediately bite her throat as soon as it's dark. I saw the message. I was very moved, thank you. Chapter 994. For Baligaju, it was best that Hellion Vivian violated the devil's pact. In that case, he would not have to think of a way to get her wish. It was just that as time passed, Bailey Jiaju's eyes also followed suit, and became extremely gloomy. It seemed that people were all the same. No matter who it was, they would choose to betray when they could save their lives. The same went for that woman. She probably took the opportunity to escape. After all, such an opportunity was rare. If she escaped to Buddhism, he would have to spend a lot of effort to hunt her down. However, these humans were too naive. Did they really think that he would not kill his way to Buddhism? Baligaju chuckled. His face was filled with unprecedented coldness. The demons behind him seemed to have sensed his rising anger, and layers of black fog surged out. Be quiet. Baligaju's eyes were deep red, and he turned around sharply. The demons immediately hid back into the darkness, afraid that their king would get angry and tear them all apart. The corners of Bailey Jiaju's mouth still carried a smile, but that kind of smile was too icy cold. He stuck out the tip of his tongue and evilly licked the blood that remained on his fingertips. Standing in the shade, his silhouette gradually became silent, a deathly silence. The demons hiding in the darkness knew that the more violent the king was, the easier it was for him to return to the peak state, where he could summon the wind and summon the rain. They had begun to feel the exciting bloodlust around them, although the demons didn't know why such a huge amount of coldness suddenly gushed out of their king's body. Such darkness made them jump with joy, like black crows that had smelled their favorite scent. Every inch of them carried an invincible demonic nature. Outside the tent, snow was flying. Hellion Vivian was trapped in the middle by 8 holy monks. Each of them was holding Buddhist beads in their hands, wearing a kasaya, and surrounded by spiritual aura. Hellion Vivian's forehead was injured, but her eyes became clearer because of the blood flowing down, like the broken ice on the horizon. With the white cloth wrapped around his left hand, he held on to the hilt of his saber. The phoenix clear trace emitted waves of sharp cries in the snow, With one slash of his saber, the ground was broken and snow was sent flying. There were 10 people lying behind her. They were all sent by the heavenly Tao. They did not have the protection of the Buddhist Dharma, so they could not withstand Hellion Vivian's attack at all. However, the people who came this time were not only Tian Dao, but also the holy monks of Buddhism. They came specifically to besiege Phoenix. If these people really recited the Buddhist scriptures and formed a barrier, Hellion Vivian would have to use all her strength to deal with them. The holy monks also thought the same. They knew very well that Beligaju had not completely demonized yet, because Hellion Vivian used her spiritual energy to balance him. In this way, Phoenix's attack power would be greatly reduced. The injuries on Hellion Vivian's body were the best evidence. The holy monks looked at each other and raised their fingers. The Buddhist scriptures kept overflowing from their thin lips. The scriptures turned into golden words, each of which could cut through the skin. Hellion Vivian avoided the first 4, but she could not avoid the last one. There were always blind spots in all directions. Her cheeks were cut and blood flowed out. The holy monks were merciful after all. They shook their heads and said heavily in Sanskrit, "Your spiritual energy now can't stop us at all. After this battle, you will be exhausted and seriously injured. Let us go. Let us pass. He can't live anymore. There is no place in the 3 realms and 6 paths that can accommodate him. He came from the chaos. Without the divinity, he is the disaster of the world. If he doesn't disappear, you will be the one who disappears. As the leader of the Buddhas, why are you so stubborn?" Hellion Vivian did not speak. Blood flowed from his fingertips and dripped onto the glacier, forming a bright red color that made people feel sorry for him. Swish! He did not give her a chance to dodge. Just as she was dealing with the holy light of Buddha, countless silver thorns broke out of the ground around Hellion Vivian's body. With a fast and arrogant manner, they pierced into her body bit by bit. Those were the weapons of Tian Dao. The silver needles transformed into vines that wrapped around her and gradually tightened. Every silver blade erupted with countless sharper needles. The needles pierced into her bones and densely tore apart her muscles. The extreme coldness was like venom that was injected into her body, oppressing her heart as if she was suffocating. Blood gushed out of her mouth. "Holy monk, why do you have to say so much to her? As a Buddha, she can't distinguish right from wrong. Such a person should be eradicated." The person who spoke had known Hellion Vivian for a long time. No, it should be said that she knew the Phoenix who had always been arrogant. At that time, fairies like them would always be forgotten in places where she appeared. They were obviously kinder than this woman. But Emperor actually fell from heaven and became a demon because of this woman, and became a person of the 3 lower realms. What she disliked the most was Phoenix's appearance. A woman was just a little good at fighting and killing. She admitted that Phoenix was the only Buddha who could fight against Emperor. She was so powerful that she could even kill fairies like them with a sword. But now, the spiritual power in her body was not even 1/10 of what it used to be. Oh, what a mess. Phoenix, oh Phoenix, you also have a day like this. The woman of Tian Dao's eyes were obviously filled with jealousy. Phoenix, do you think you are very powerful? Even at this point, you still want to protect Emperor. To be honest, the person who hurt him to this point is you. The woman raised the soul-seizing needle in her hand again and stabbed it fiercely. Now that you have become his exclusive soul, why don't you just let him eat you? Why do you have to do such boring things? It's really annoying. Don't you know? What demons don't need the most is love. You are imprisoning him. Hellion Vivian's fingers shook. Those silver needles seemed to have found a loophole and stabbed deeper. It's time to end it. Look at yourself. It is because of you that you have implicated Emperor. The woman laughed, her face distorted. You don't know what he wants the most. You are never worthy of him. Stop talking. Hellion Vivian lowered her head, like a beautiful butterfly suspended in the air. But even in such a posture, it was difficult to reduce the coldness of her body. With an indifferent expression, she coldly spat out 2 words. You really don't change. Even now, you are still so arrogant. Do you know that your current appearance will only make people feel disgusted? The woman raised her left hand high, her eyes red like flames. He must feel the same, so go to hell. Chapter 995. Boom. Icicles swept up from the top of Hellion Vivian's head like a storm. The holy light of Buddha was enough to restrict Hellion Vivian's movements. This time, the phoenix would definitely not be able to escape alive. However, what the woman did not expect was that at that moment, Hellion Vivian suddenly raised her eyes. The cold cyclones flowing freely in the air seemed to listen to her command. Everyone said that the phoenix was bathed in fire. However, not many had actually seen it. It was a scorching heat that was emitted from the inside out. No one dared to approach it. The glaciers behind Hellion Vivian collapsed one after another. She was still holding the phoenix bone knife in her hand. As it flapped, her entire body was covered with a layer of fire. The fire was like the most ancient totem, weaving the boiling blood sea of Mount Buzhou and the fiery wings of the phoenix behind her. The woman from Tiandao saw this scene. Her eyes shook violently. This is impossible. You are not as powerful as before. How can you still? Hellion Vivian did not speak. She slowly pulled out the silver needles that were nailed to her. The blood on the back of her hand flowed to the ground, dyeing her windbreaker red. The phoenix feathers formed sparks in the air as clusters of them soared up with a crashing noise. Countless tiny snowflakes condensed into ice crystals that filled the air, refracting a resplendent ray of light that shone on Wei Wei's cold face. Her pupils were like a pure and holy twilight that could eliminate everything before her eyes. The woman wanted to escape, but she found that her two legs could no longer move. The flames that spread from her heels were burning her body. Almost in an instant the ground shook violently. The phoenix's clear trace was enough to burn everything. The people from Tiandao and Buddhist Dao knew that it would be disadvantageous for them if they continued. They simply floated around and planned to wait for 2 days before making a move. Ho Zil, surrounded by snowy mountains, was left with nothing but emptiness after the battle. When Beligaju raised his head, he saw that Hellion Vivian was already standing in front of him. Her body was covered with cuts. She looked at him and smiled. I'm back. Then he collapsed. Beligaju didn't know why he protected her. He just felt that it was very dazzling. Every wound on her body was dazzling. I'm fine. I'm just too tired. I'll be fine after some rest. Beligaju tightened his grip on her fingers, and his eyes darkened. She seemed to have regained some of her strength, and hugged his waist. Her voice was hoarse. I never thought of trapping you. Beligaju didn't say anything. The evil aura made him irritated. But she's right. You became like this because of me. Shouldn't I stay by your side? Hellion Vivian put her head on Beligaju's chest, and then fell asleep. He had completely exhausted his physical strength, and suffered from altitude sickness. Just like what the holy monks had said, Phoenix had sacrificed her vitality to protect Beligaju. The tent was silent. A little bit of cold air began to invade from all directions. Beligaju didn't say a word as he placed Hellion Vivian in the coffin. Then he walked out of the tent. His black boots made a clear sound as he stepped on the snow. In the distance, the fairy who was on the verge of death saw Beligaju's figure, and her eyes suddenly lit up. Rip! A huge and resplendent flower of ice and snow bloomed on the fairy's chest. Its sharp and hard petals were extremely beautiful. They pierced through flesh and bone. Silver white ice crystals that were like crazy vines pierced through the soles of her feet. They went all the way up her calves and thighs. Blood gushed out from her throat. She didn't even know why the man had made a move. Beligaju narrowed his blood-red eyes. He broke through the ground with a diamond-like coldness. My soul, do you think you have the right to make a move? There was a loud bang. In the distance, 2 people from Tiandao were shaken to the ground. Blood flowed all over the ground. Bailey Jiaju stood there, his black robe fluttering in the wind. It was as light as a black smoke floating in the air, wrapping around his slender and powerful body. It turned out that although sunlight in him would cause harm, it was already weakening. It was obvious that his demonic nature was beginning to be able to cover up his spiritual nature. The situation was more serious than they had imagined. The people from both the divine and Buddhist paths thought that they could use this opportunity to eliminate Beligaju, but now they realized that no one could stop him. The demonization was already set in stone. After dealing with the people outside, Beligaju returned to the tent. He looked at Hellion Vivian in the coffin, who was riddled with wounds. His gaze was a little uncertain. His fingers automatically stroked her hair, but he smiled coldly. Stupid. If it was anyone else, they would have taken this opportunity to escape. But she was still stupid enough to stay and be his shield. This woman had no intelligence at all. Baligaju lowered his eyes and hugged her in his arms. His voice was faint. If even you don't have the right to stay by my side, who does? As a master, how can you be so unconfident? Hellion Vivian couldn't hear this sentence. She was in a deep sleep. She was in the right position, so she was even more so. Stupid. Baligaju said in a low voice again. He patted her back with one hand. The demons hiding in the darkness didn't know why, but the darkness on their king's body was suppressed again. But they knew very well that this was only temporary. Once the time was up, their king would swallow the whole human into his stomach. In fact, this was indeed the case, because in the next moment, Baligaju had already started to plan how to eat people. When Hellion Vivian woke up again, she heard him whispering something in her ear. This was the unique hallucination of demons. It could make people reveal the deepest secrets in their hearts when they were unprepared. She looked at him and said with a tired voice, "There are still 5.5 days. It's easy to pass. Don't attack me when I'm unprepared. I can still help you deal with those Buddhists. You are indeed a little useful. But my master, aren't you overestimating yourself?" Baligaju reached out and pinched her chin. "Tell me your wish now. I can naturally deal with those Buddhists. It's just a few people and you're already so tired. How can you help me like this? Why don't I help you free, my dear master?" Many people think that it's very satisfying to be devoured by demons. In fact, if it's you, I will treat you very gently. After all, you are very delicious. Hellion Vivian coughed softly. Her head was also throbbing. In the face of Baligaju's words, she didn't reply. Instead, she hugged him and buried her face in his arms. She had already expected this result when she used her spiritual energy to balance him. She wanted to tell this person that soon, he would be able to return to his previous arrogant self. Chapter 996. But in the end, Hellion Vivian still didn't say anything. She suddenly remembered that when she was looking for his soul fragment, he was shouting to let her go, but his hand was still holding on to her. This time was different from that time. He had really forgotten about her. Even if he remembered, she was just a soul that had signed a contract with him. "I need to sleep. There's a lot of fresh blood in the wooden box outside. If you're hungry, you can open it and drink." Baligaju was very clear about the condition of Hellion Vivian's body. He bit open the blood bag and saw her breathing heavily at the side. He frowned. At night, Hellion Vivian's high fever became more serious. She seemed to have a fever, but also seemed to be coughing. After the wound was infected, without spiritual energy to heal, it would indeed cause this result. However, the same thing was that demons wouldn't attack such prey. Demons like to raise the most. If they wanted to eat someone, they would definitely wash that person from head to toe. So that night, the two of them were very safe. Baligaju didn't like to lie with others. He let go of the coffin and lay down in the tent with his arms behind his head. There was suddenly a blanket on his body. When he opened his eyes, he was already warm. The person in his arms was still very warm. It could even be said that her body temperature was too high. Baligaju frowned and then smiled wickedly. "Throw yourself into my arms? I'm a little cold. I think I have a fever." Hellion Vivian hugged his waist and said in a deep voice, "Since I can't infect you, then hug me to sleep. You can't not cover yourself with a blanket." As a demon, Baligaju couldn't refuse his master's request. Only this woman was so stupid. She could clearly order him to do things, but she didn't let him do anything. "My master, you can order me." Baligaju lowered his head and kissed her neck. But in the next second he frowned. Her body was too hot. Humans would most likely die if they did that. Baligaju lifted her face and said in a harsh tone, "Don't sleep. You brought so many things. You must have brought the medicine that you humans take. Where is it? I'll get it for you." Blood bagged below. After Hellion Vivian finished speaking, she closed her eyes. Baligaju didn't waste any time. He stretched out his left hand and grabbed the wooden box. He flipped to the bottom and took out a box of powder. Thinking that this thing should be washed with hot water, a glint flashed across his eyes, and the bucket of water beside him began to heat up. After preparing the medicine, Beligaju wanted to feed Hellion Vivian, but in the end, he felt that it was troublesome for a human to fall ill. So he took a big gulp and kissed Hellion Vivian on the lips. The next day his fever finally subsided. Of course, Hellion Vivian knew that it was impossible for him to recover so quickly with just that little medicine. Her body was still very vain. She didn't know what Beligaju did to make her body temperature not so high. Hellion Vivian was sweating all over, and her windbreaker was stained with blood. She didn't need to look to know how pathetic she was. But what she didn't expect was that after sleeping for a while, the tent looked like it had been robbed. Especially the water and wooden box that she had carefully prepared. They were no longer in their original state. Things were overturned everywhere, and most of them were steaks and chocolates on the ground. Hellion Wei massaged her temples as she felt a headache coming on. She pulled the blanket and stood up. When she opened the tent, she saw the most beautiful sunrise. In Hozil, there were 3,000 people on the snowline. The man stood in the dazzling light. His face was as beautiful as an ice sculpture. His long hair, which was covered in snow, was scattered by his side. Under his black windbreaker, his feet stepped on the snow without a care. Black fog was emitted from his body. It was a darkness that could compete with the light. Hellion Vivian's heart suddenly sank. He was not even afraid of the sunlight. That also meant that he was one step closer to becoming a demon. As if he was aware of her existence, Beligaju slowly walked back. He reached out and grabbed Hellion Vivian. His slightly exposed fangs rubbed her lips. "Good morning, my master. The aura in your body seems to have weakened a lot. Those people from the upper realm have really done a good thing. Even if I don't know what the wish is, I can eat you in advance and leave this cold and lifeless place. You'll definitely feel cold standing outside." Hellion Vivian avoided the sarcasm in his tone, and then held both of his hands. She lowered her head and blew 2 breaths. Her attitude was natural. "Is it warmer?" Beligaju's fingers moved. When the temperature that did not belong to a demon came from his fingertips, his chest felt empty. That emptiness made him want to destroy something more. However, he still resisted. After all, it was daytime, not nighttime. When the 4th night came, his demonic aura would be further released. During the day, it was time for him to rest. No matter how vicious Beligaju was, he would always be gentle to Hellion Wei. This was the nature of a demon. He was elegant and indifferent to outsiders. But he was patient enough to treat his master. Not to mention a master like Hellion Vivian. She was different from all the humans he had met before. Because no one would hold his hand and give him warmth. Some people felt that he did not need it, and some people did not dare. And this person seemed to be really not worried about being swallowed by him. "Thank you for yesterday's medicine." Hellion Vivian hugged him. She did not know why. But ever since she came here, she wanted to hug him more and more. "I'm very happy." Beligaju's thin lips were close to her ear. His voice was still pleasant to hear. "This kind of thing is what I should do. An unhealthy body will not be too delicious to eat. Okay, go eat something. Your body needs these." "So that's why." Hellion Vivian's voice became very low in an instant. Beligaju chuckled. "What else did you think it was?" "Yes, what else could it be?" Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes. Although she told herself not to care, it still hurt a little. "It's nothing. It's just that when you made the medicine, you made the tent look like it had been ransacked. It's a little strange." Beligaju paused. Indeed, according to the requirements of a demon for beauty, everything should be done in a calm and unhurried manner. At that time, he seemed to have forgotten to care about that. However, it was just a small matter in the end. What Beligaju cared about was when he could dig out the heart of the person in front of him and eat it bite by bite. Chapter 997. Demons ate from the heart. Therefore, Beligaju couldn't help but hold Hellion Vivian's soft hand. "Master, do you really not need me to warm you up with my body?" "No need." Hellion Vivian pushed him away, her eyes clear. "If you really don't have anything to do, help me fry a piece of steak." "Steak?" Beligaju snorted. "Human food." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. So, you know how to cook? No. Beligage's voice was very calm. Hellion Vivian nodded. Then today's order is to fry a piece of steak for me. I'll watch you from the side. Beligage smiled. Master, are you sure you want to waste your order on such an unimportant thing? This is very important to me. Hellion Vivian looked at his insufferably arrogant appearance and felt her heart soften. She turned her head and kissed the back of his hand. I haven't eaten your food yet. As a demon, Beligage certainly wouldn't refuse his master's request. He curled his thin lips and said in a magnetic voice, As you wish, master. It had to be said that Beligage would do everything perfectly. The steak was ready-made. Once the things in the packaging were removed, placed in the pot, and added oil, it would be able to fry a good steak. Beligage walked over with a plate. Just like how Hellion Vivian served him breakfast before. This time he poured milk for her. The cutlery wasn't perfect, so Hellion Vivian skipped the tedious details. She ate a mouthful of meat and a mouthful of milk, but she ate a little slowly. In fact, her appetite wasn't very good. Eating steak wasn't the best choice after just being sick. She just wanted to replenish her energy and for convenience, forced herself to eat 2 mouthfuls and some fruits. Beligage looked at her from the side and frowned. Then he took the plate away and poured all the meat into a plastic bag. Then, he took out a tissue and wiped his fingers. If you don't want to eat, then force yourself to eat. Don't you know what's good for you humans when you're sick? Hellion Vivian paused. She didn't think too much. Besides, did she really want that certain highness, who didn't touch the sun and spring water, to make soup for her? There were ingredients. The radishes and chicken were wrapped to withstand the cold. What else are in the boxes you brought with you? Beligage's voice was very indifferent. Since you plan to stay here for 7 days, it shouldn't be just this meat. Hellion Vivian watched the man leave this sentence and began to rummage through the boxes. She finally understood why the tent had become like that. Looking at Beligage's side profile cooking, she felt that it was a very beautiful thing. Although his eyes were still shining with a bloodthirsty light, his tall and slender back view was still reassuring. The tip of the demon's tongue didn't seem to be very sensitive to human food, and Beligage couldn't taste the saltiness of the soup. After cooking for a while, he scooped out a little with a spoon for Hellion Vivian to taste. He gave off a very serious feeling. Hellion Vivian had never doubted that Her Highness was a good man. Even if he had become a demon, everything he did was just to be able to eat her well. However, looking at Beligage frowning and staring at the fire, Hellion Vivian easily fell asleep. After tossing and turning for a long time, when the fire was finally turned off, the person who was going to feed the soup sat there and fell asleep. Beligage stopped what he was doing and bent down to look at Hellion Vivian. Then he slowly bent down, picked her up, and put her into the coffin. Then, he walked out of the tent. At this time, a mountaineering team was resting in the lee of the glacier. Several members sat around the smokeless stove and were heating special dehydrated beef to replenish their strength. Everyone, hurry up and eat. After eating, we will go east and see the Tibetan antelopes drinking water. Jashi was sitting by the stove. There were not many people who dared to be a guide in Hozil. After all, this place had not been civilized. A mountaineer adjusted the camera and said without raising his head, I have just seen the east. There is nothing special. The scenery is almost the same as the one we walked all the way here. I want to go from the west, towards the snow mountain. I heard that you can see the glacier and Mount Everest there. Jashi, take us to the west. Yes, Jashi, go to the west. We all want to see the snow mountain closer. The person who said this was a female mountaineer. She was fully dressed and wore a pair of goggles on her head. She lowered her head and took 2 breaths of oxygen. Don't worry, we are all scientists. We will not do anything to harm ourselves. The technician also turned his head. If it really doesn't work, we can still pay more. This time, we came out to better understand Hozil. If we don't photograph the snow mountain and the glacier, the information will be missing. We are now working on a project in the Tibetan area. Jashi, I hope you can support this work. I am very sorry, my honorable guest. Jashi said this sentence in Tibetan. Then, he realized something and switched to Chinese. We have our own rules. Allah told us that the most taboo thing to do in Hozil is to go near the snow mountain. This is not a matter of money. I brought you here, so I will bring everyone back safely. Moreover, I promised my boss that I will not go near the west during this period of time, so I am very sorry. The female mountaineer had a pair of binoculars around her neck. She raised it up and laughed. Jiaxi, everything is negotiable. Do you think that the price is too low? We can all increase it. Don't tell us the story of Allah. If the snow mountain is really so dangerous, there will not be a tent there. There are obviously people there. There is a tent beside the snow mountain? The technician was excited. He raised his binoculars and looked in the direction that the female mountaineer said. How is it possible? There is really a tent. What kind of people live there? Are they local Tibetans? Didn't they say that this is a no-man's land with no signal and no people? Just when everyone wanted to take a look, Jiaxi knocked the binoculars out of the technician's hands. What are you doing? The technician jumped up as if he had been stung by a bee. Jiaxi, do you know how expensive this thing is? Jiaxi ignored his words and still did not let them see. We can't go to the west of the snow mountain. Let's go back the way we came. Don't go any further. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. The technician sneered. Why go back the way we came? We just want to go to the snow mountain to have a look. Chapter 998. Jiaxi looked at him. His Chinese was still stiff, but he clearly expressed his displeasure. I once said that you have to listen to me when you reach Hozil. The original arrangement was to go to the east. If you don't want to continue, just turn around and go down the mountain. This matter is over. Going to the west is not within the agreed range. I won't accept it. You. The technician still wanted to argue. The female member stood in front of him, with a camera around her neck. If it's because of your belief, you can choose not to go there. This is not against the rules. No, in my opinion, this is against the rules. Jiaxi was very insistent. The female member smiled and shook her head. That's why you Tibetans are so stubborn. But we are different. As long as there is enough oxygen, there is no reason to stop us from going to the snow peak. As she spoke, the female member turned her head. Everyone get ready. Those who want to go to the snow peak can follow us. We have instruments in our hands that can accurately distinguish between north and south. Those who are timid can follow Jiaxi back. After all, it is understandable that no one stays behind to take the risk. This mountaineering team was too young. The consequence of being too young was that it was easy to forget to listen to other people's opinions when they encountered the scenery that they liked. In Hozil, a Tibetan was worth more than 10 instruments. This was nature. Only those who lived here knew where to go and where not to go. Jiaxi was betrayed by his friends, and no one listened to him anymore. However, he could not leave these people alone. The wolf dog ran happily behind Jiaxi, but it still did not want to go to the snow mountain in the west. This meant that it was very obvious. In this land, animals were often more sensitive than humans. The wind and snow continued. The higher they went, the colder it became. At the same time, it was accompanied by a strong altitude reaction. Several members of the team took turns to take oxygen after walking for a while. Just like what they said, it was very convenient to carry a device with you wherever you go. In fact, it was more tiring to walk on the plateau more than 6,000 feet above sea level. They thought that the snow mountain was very close, but it took them 5 hours to walk. When they arrived at their destination, the sun began to set. People who lived in Tibet all knew that. Do not walk outside at night. If it was too dark, you must go back to a place with people. This was the rule. Once again, Jiaxi stood up and tried to get them to return to the team. At night, there will be wolves and avalanches. These glaciers might even melt. Do you understand? The inspector held the camera with one hand, and only the beauty of this place was left in his eyes. It's really a paradise on earth. Why didn't I discover such a beautiful place earlier? Jiaxi clenched his fists. Why didn't these people listen to him? The female team member was polite, but her words were always a little hypocritical. Jiaxi, you have a dog by your side, and we all have torches. I have also played in the wild before. They are just wolves and they are afraid of fire. That's because you haven't seen a pack of wolves. Jashi blushed and said in Tibetan. We must go back immediately. The female team member disagreed. When she picked up the binoculars, she caught a glimpse of something. Tents. There really are tents there. Jashi also paused for a moment because in his impression, no one would dare to camp here. Even they would not choose to spend the night in the no man's land, because it was too dangerous. After all, the wolves in Hozil were much more ferocious than these people imagined. For a moment, Jashi thought of the employer, who dragged the coffin into the night. Could it be that the tent was hers? Before Jashi could stop them, the mountaineering team had already strode toward the tent. At this time something strange happened. The wolf dog that Jashi brought refused to take another step forward. Instead, it seemed to have foreseen something terrible, and curled up into a ball, shivering. Look, what is that? The female team member breathed heavily, and her eyes were full of amazement. There was no wolf pack here, and there was no danger as the guide had said. On the contrary, 3,000 meters above the snow line, there was a man sitting beside a glacier cliff. He had an excellent figure, and was wearing a cloak. He was like a silent and valiant snow leopard, only revealing a pair of deep eyes. He was so handsome that it was as if he had walked out of a manga. Is he a local? The female team member guessed excitedly. She walked forward and said in Tibetan, Jashi, here you are. Baligaju listened and tilted his head, revealing a charming smile, and a bewitching voice that demons were best at. You smell so good. The female team member was stunned and blushed uncontrollably. At this time, she did not realize that Baligaju had another meaning when he said that she smelled good. She thought that it was the essential oil of the perfume on her body that had played a role in it. You can speak Chinese? The female team member smiled again. That's great. Just now, our guide said that there was no one in this place, and it was very dangerous. He told us not to come. It seems that there is no danger here at all. Instead, there is a handsome man. Baligaju lowered his head, and the cloak cleverly blocked his completely black nails. He stuck out the tip of his tongue and licked it. The corner of his mouth lifted into an elegant arc. It's a fragrance that I haven't smelled for a long time. It can easily make people fall. The female team member's face became even hotter, but when she saw the wine glass in his hand, she could not help but be curious. How can there be such red wine? Won't the wine on the plateau freeze? This is not wine. Baligaju did not raise his head and smiled. This is blood, very fresh blood. His voice was very low, and even pleasant to the ears. However, when it reverberated through the endless snowy mountains, it caused everyone to fall silent. After a while, the female team member smiled awkwardly. Hee, you are really humorous. Humorous? Baligaju raised his head. His silver hair fluttered in the darkness, and his fangs were slightly exposed, making him look extremely evil. The female team member's face immediately changed. She took a step back and wanted to escape. However, it was too late. A mocking smile appeared in Baligaju's eyes. Then, he moved. It was the kind of movement that flashed by, as fast as the speed of light. He, who should have been sitting in the snow, appeared in front of the female team member in the blink of an eye. His left hand firmly gripped her neck, and the wind blew his silver hair into a mess. His scarlet eyes no longer had the usual laziness, the occasional evil charm, and the impatience he had when facing Hellion Vivian. There was only killing intent and coldness. The most important step in the demonization of a demon was the rendering of human desires. And today Baligaju had finally completed this step ahead of time. Chapter 999. Save me, Zhang Ming Lian, come and save me. The female team member was trembling all over as she screamed shrilly. However, the team members who had boarded the ship were already scared out of their wits. How could they go forward? They all dropped their cameras and ran away. No one dared to look back, as if there was an unknown monster behind them. Baligaju smiled, and the black gas lingered around him. This is the reaction that a human should have. Fear, betrayal. It has been like this since the beginning. Didn't you blush when you saw me just now? Why? I just started to show my original appearance, And you are already scared. Ha ha ha. No, don't. In the tent, the sick Hellion Vivian suddenly woke up. She arched her body and rushed toward the glacier like an arrow released from the bow. There was a loud bang. The phoenix blade slashed out a fierce flame. Hellion Vivian grabbed the female team member's arm and said in a low voice, "Ju, stop. Don't steal my prey, and don't get in my way." In the wind and snow, Beligaju did not let go of the woman in his hand. There was no expression on his handsome face. "Otherwise, I will kill you too." Hellion Vivian did not speak, nor did she give in. The smile on Bailey Jiaju's face deepened. "So, do you want to be my enemy now, my naive master?" The cold wind suddenly tightened, and the snow swept past like a sharp blade, lifting the corners of their clothes at the same time. Hellion Vivian knew that once a human appeared at this time, the demon in his body would be completely activated. However, Hellion Vivian did not expect such an accident to happen. She tilted her head and looked at Jiaxi. Jiaxi did not escape, but his face was extremely pale. He suddenly remembered that night when he received Hellion Vivian. He saw a pure black coffin. She said that she would wait for a chance to let him see the person she liked. He always thought that it was an unfulfilled wish, but now it seemed that the man in the coffin was a demon. Jiaxi didn't know what to do. He was very worried. Hellion Vivian turned around and looked at Beligaju. Her voice was light, but her breath was still warm. "I don't want to be your enemy. It's just that I don't like you touching other women. Do you think I'm just saying that I like you? Beligaju, don't forget that I'm the one who made the contract with you. You're mine." Beligaju was still thinking about what kind of angle to stab his fangs into the female member's neck. But now, all the thoughts in his mind were gone. All that was left in front of him was that stubborn and good-looking face. How could there be such a person in this world? She was smart and pure. She could speak so openly, so pure that only the instinct to possess her was left. It was an uncontrollable desire that came from the depths of his body. Green veins protruded from his handsome and resolute face, and his eyes were faintly discernible with hostility. A strong desire to, "I want more." The desire in his heart kept rising. The taste of this person made him crazy. The thirst in his blood made him want to pounce on her and devour her soul. His remaining reason restrained him, telling him that he couldn't do that. But his sharp fangs couldn't be retracted. He had to eat something. Bailey Jiaju turned his head and fiercely bit in the direction of the female team member. Hellion Vivian raised her hand and used her arm to replace the female member's neck. The pain instantly spread to the entire body. When the female member saw that she was saved, she began to flee in panic, not caring about what Hellion Vivian would do. The first thing to do when the demon was aroused was to consume. But just like what Hellion Vivian said, she didn't like him to be tainted with other people's scent. She didn't want to see his hands stained with blood. In Hellion Vivian's heart, this man had always been the young man she saw on Mountain Tenya. He was clean, upright, and unapproachable. Only such a person was not afraid of gods and Buddhas, and was arrogant and independent. After the young man left, Hellion Vivian didn't go there to eat buns for a long time. Such a person was in fact very gentle. He didn't reject her, and even brought her to many places in the future. He said more than once that he wanted to lock himself up, but he was the one who gave her the most freedom and companionship. In the past she used to talk to Bodhi, and there was no response. She didn't know how to communicate with others, and was very serious in everything she did. Every time she went to his temple, her hands would be wet. The venerables of Buddhism would avoid her when they saw her, and only he would frown and hold her hand to wash her hands. She was a boring person who didn't know anything, and when she crossed out the things that she had to do every day, he would indulge her. But at that time, he had a pile of things to deal with. Get lost. Beligage's voice was very cold. His fangs were still stained with Hellion Vivian's blood, but she didn't exist in his eyes at all. His eyes were fixed on the female team member not far away, and the strong murderous aura caused the sky to be filled with frightening dark clouds. Hellion Vivian didn't move, of course. Countless black fog rose behind Beligaju, and his tone was extremely cold. "My naive master, you should learn from normal humans. Look at what they do, and if you do the same, I won't hate you so much. You're right, If you stay by my side, I don't know how many times happier I will be. You're the one who restrained me, so I'll say it again, get lost. I want to hunt. Hate. When she heard this word, Hellion Vivian's heart, which didn't have much strength, clenched fiercely. She raised her head, looked at the man who was about to complete his demonization, and hugged him without hesitation. Her voice was a little hoarse from the pain. Now I understand what you said before. I really want to lock you up, and not let anyone see you. Don't eat other women. I'll give up using my spiritual energy to resist, and you'll easily suck me dry. I'm the one you want the most, isn't it? Of course. After Beligaju heard Hellion Vivian, he smiled evilly. He reached out and lifted Hellion Vivian's chin, and kissed her lips. He was completely heartless like a demon. If you're willing to give yourself to me, I won't let myself suffer and eat those inferior souls. After saying that, he lowered his head and fiercely bit Hellion Vivian's throat. His black nails cut open her clothes and pierced her skin. Every bite was like a kiss, but it was real damage. He gently licked the blood and coaxed naturally. My delicious master, now can you tell me what your wish is? Chapter 1000. The demonization was complete. Beligaju, who was exuding a black fog, was like a red spider lily in full bloom in the demon world. He was incomparably handsome. He sucked the blood and raised his head slightly. The lines of his jawbone were like a quiet bay. Behind him, huge wings spread out without warning. The black feathers that symbolized sin, darkness, and greed fell one after another. The demon song played. Together with his wings, they slowly flew, as if they could embrace the stars in the sky. Hellion Vivian knew that she couldn't stop it. Enduring the pain, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his waist. Just like before, she wanted to give him warmth, but her breath became very weak. At that moment, even her lips were pale. Only the tears in her eyes were very gentle. I want you to be happy and not be alone. This is my wish. Hearing this, Beligaju's body suddenly shook. No one had ever made such a wish for him. He remembered the day of the fall. He was thrown into the flames of hell, and endured unbearable pain. The real fall only began in the third hell. His soul would be completely crushed. Every bone seemed to be in pain. No one would think for him. But at that time, what was he thinking? Revenge? Bailey Jiaju's stiff fingers tightened around Hellion Weiwei in his arms. The light in his eyes gradually condensed into a single spot, converging into a blood-red pattern. The softness in his arms made him stop moving. Something important was disappearing little by little with the blood flowing out of her chest. It was a feeling that he hadn't felt for a long time. She lay in his arms. Her pale face had long lost its original vitality. She was like an obedient puppet. In the past, he had thought of destroying her countless times. But the moment she really lost all her warmth, he felt an unprecedented emptiness. Was this feeling good or bad? No one would be able to restrain him anymore, and his chest would no longer be as restless as before. He had wanted so much to get rid of this feeling. If he could finally get rid of it, and she would never appear in front of him again. Why did he feel like he was drained of all his strength? As her blood seeped in, something surged up bit by bit. There was one person who never let him live in peace. He had been very shrewd since he was young. He always wore a kasaya that did not fit his figure, and the sleeves were not right. However, he liked to run around Mountain Tenya with water in his hands. He did not look like a little monk at all. She was like a cat. After seeing you, she would first throw you to steamed bun, and observe you for a while. She would only approach you when you were good to her. But later on, you realized that she wasn't a cat, but a canine, giving without expecting anything in return. It was a look of complete trust. There was also the gentleness of putting all her eggs in one basket. She will take whatever you say seriously. She was obviously very smart, but she would clumsily lie on the table and carefully remember what the two of them did. Only then did Beligaju remember. When he fell from the heavens and became a demon, he never thought about revenge. Instead, he thought about his little phoenix. Without him, would she be bullied in Buddhism? During the twilight of the gods, what he thought the most was that she would push him down, then lean into his arms and hug him domineeringly. It was such an important thing. How could he forget? Beligaju's black-gloved fingers dug into his palms. He hurriedly wiped the blood for the person in his arms. No one could see his expression clearly. He hugged Hellion Vivian and knelt down on his knees. With one hand hanging down, his entire head was lowered. This person did not kneel to the heavens or the earth. He was not afraid of gods or Buddha, but at this moment, he was like a defeated army. Huge cracks appeared on the glacier around him one after another. Countless man-eating black crows rose in an instant. Big birds flew across the snow mountains, raising their heads and crying. Suddenly, a hoarse voice rang out between the heavens and the earth, spreading to every corner of the world. In this world where demons and monsters were running rampant, all the ghosts and monsters trembled in fear and involuntarily revealed their true forms. That was the roar of the leader of thousands of demons. That was the sadness that reached the depths of the human heart. That was the hatred that could penetrate the 18 layers of hell. The roar shook the gate of hell. The reapers could not help but tremble. They looked at each other. The chains in their hands that were used to bind souls were shattered by the invisible devil energy. In the car shop, Hellion Qingchen, who was washing her hair, suddenly sat up straight. She did not care about Bailey Shangxia, who was still flushing her behind, and ran out. Bailey Shangxia pulled him back and patted him on the back with his blackened fingernails. He did not say a word and looked very cool. Hellion Qingchen suddenly realized that her brother was the most uncomfortable at this moment. She hugged Bailey Shangxia and said in a muffled voice, "It will be okay. Believe in beauty, Hellion." Okay. Bailey Shangxia did not tell Hellion Qingchen that his change meant that his father had lost his humanity. Even if something really happened, he had to stabilize himself and take good care of his younger brother. Hellion Qingchen also did not let Bailey Shangxia worry. She even knew that it was more important to help her brother hide his identity at this time. She covered Bailey Shangxia's ears with her small hands. After entering the car shop, she took a big windbreaker and covered Bailey Shangxia with it. The two little people snuggled up to each other and sat in the corner. They had never been so well behaved before. The sun gradually set, and the sky was full of splendor. It was the real time to meet the devil. Beligaju carried Hellion Vivian and walked towards Jiaxi. His long hair fluttered in the dark. His footsteps were crisp and clear. It was the sound of the ground being crushed. She could no longer feel anything from this man. Pride, elegance, contempt, mockery, weakness, and cruelty. He just walked. His long and thick eyelashes were stained with snow. Jiaxi was dumbfounded. He did not know how to react at all. He could not believe that all the glaciers around him had collapsed. But he was the only one who was still intact. Jiaxi would never know that Hellion Vivian's last glance saved his life alone. No one could have predicted that this would be the result. The climbers who were eventually buried in the overwhelming avalanche never thought that they would lose their lives because they didn't listen to others' advice. If it were not for the female climber's approach and the dirty thoughts in her heart, Beligaju might not have been demonized in advance. But everyone knew that things would eventually come to this point. At night, under 90 or 80 miles of snow, the red spider lilies were in full swing, floating on a dark river. It was indescribably beautiful. Chapter 1001. In the river, a small boat suddenly appeared. This river was called the Styx River. It was the river of life in the underworld. Souls that couldn't ascend to heaven floated on it, like rising clouds. Beligaju stood at the bow of the boat, wearing a black cloak. He quietly held the bamboo pole and lowered his head to look at Hellion Vivian in the boat. She didn't open her eyes, but he could hear her voice. "Where is this?" she asked. Beligaju smoothed her messy long hair. His slender straight face had an unprecedented gentleness. The Styx River. Then, his thin lips fell on her forehead. That small face still showed no signs of waking up, and there was no grief. It was just very quiet, so quiet that it was peaceful, and even smiling. The place where demons devour souls. Hellion Weiwei couldn't see anything, as she was immersed in a black fog. The only thing she could feel was his slightly cold lips, carrying a unique chill as he comforted her. Hellion Vivian asked again, "Are you going to start eating my souls now? They seem to be leaving my body." "Shoo." He stretched out his hand and pressed his finger on her pale thin lips. Don't talk. Sleep for a while. You need to rest. In her deep sleep, Hellion Vivian sighed. Okay. Good girl. He always treated her in the most doting way. Even when he was about to devour her, he still treated her with the same gentleness. Beligaju stretched out his hand and put Hellion Vivian in his arms. Her beautiful upper body was naked. The black cloak that was originally covering her outside had become her protection against the cold. But Hellion Vivian didn't want to sleep. She still wanted to talk to him. But just like what Beligaju said, she had no strength left. If it wasn't for the extremely low temperature in Hozil, she was afraid that she would have died directly in the snowy glacier and wouldn't have dragged on until now. Hellion Vivian realized that her light of Buddha was weakening. Soon, she would fall to the bottom of the Styx River like many creatures. The only difference was that while other souls could reincarnate, she would disappear forever. No one knew what Beligaju wanted to do, and the messengers in charge of escorting the undead felt even more miserable. They didn't know why a certain highness would appear at the intersection of the underworld and the demon world. In the past, Beligaju had always disdained the underworld. He liked cleanliness, so he would never come to the underworld, which was full of undead. What was going on this time? If they knew that he was here, these undead wouldn't dare to go over, let alone reincarnate. Even the evil spirits buried in the 18 levels of hell began to tremble and wanted to run away from home. If they did not think of a way to get a certain person to leave, Hades would definitely fall into an unprecedented panic. What is he doing here? Fight. The tall king of hell picked up the judge with one hand. There was only displeasure on his wild and handsome face. The judge stammered. It doesn't look like it. But if someone gets close to him, he'll probably go crazy. I'm not afraid of him going crazy. I've never liked this pretty boy, so I'll get rid of him today. The king of hell threw his subordinate aside and walked out with a sinister smile. The woman sitting behind him crossed her legs. Did you ask me to come to the lower realm so that I can watch you fight with the emperor? Of course not. The king of hell immediately changed his direction and sat back down obediently. The corners of his lips curled up seductively. It's just that little Seven has been missing you a lot recently and has been asking to see you. The judge. Why did the big bosses of the demon world and the underworld like to use their sons as an excuse when they want to trick their wives? Also, my lord, don't smile while talking. Your tail is already wagging. I can't bear to look at it. But the emperor must have met with some trouble to come here at this time. The woman fell into deep thought. You should go and help him. The king of hell thought to himself. It's fine if I don't take the opportunity to kill him. But you expect me to help him? No. Two very simple words. The woman looked at him for a while. All right, then there's nothing to talk about between us. You. The king of hell fiercely bit his fangs. I understand, I'll go now. The judge. My lord, can you have some integrity? You weren't like this before, my lord. Also, are you sure you won't lose control and accidentally fight with his highness? After all, he's your love rival for thousands of years. The king of hell couldn't take it anymore. So he left the sect and sent a ghost messenger to check on the situation. The ghost messenger said that Beligaju came with a boat and that the wisdom king of Phoenix's body was on the boat. The king of hell basically understood what was going on. In a sense, the king of hell hoped that Beligaju and Hellion Vivian could be together forever. This way, that pretty boy wouldn't have to endanger other people's families. Therefore, the king of hell generously asked the ghost messengers to lead the dead souls to other places first, so that they wouldn't continue to jump into the river Styx. The red spider lilies spread on the banks of the river Styx. Everyone said that it symbolized misfortune and despair. But even so, it couldn't stop people from yearning for it. Legend said that it grew in places where souls were the most concentrated. When the breeze blew, one could faintly hear a song. That was the singing of mermaids. Don't think that mermaids are beautiful things. That's right, they were indeed very beautiful. They had the most ethereal voices and clean faces in the world, gentle and pitiful. When they looked into your eyes, you couldn't help but agree to anything they wanted. However, when you agreed, they would bare their sharp teeth and quickly drag you to the deepest part of the river, gnawing on you until you didn't have a single piece left. Baligaju walked over. The mermaids floated to the surface and obediently made a path for him. He placed Hellion Vivian in the sea of flowers. His cold eyes stared at the mermaids that he summoned. With an indifferent expression, he gave a concise order. Sing until she wakes up. The mermaids didn't dare to disobey his order. Their eyes were intoxicated with his elegant and cold face. They placed their hands in front of them and gently opened their mouths. A beautiful Sanskrit song followed, blowing the sea of flowers. Legend said that the mermaid's song could summon souls. But in reality, this probability was very low. Baligaju lowered his head and bit his wrist, placing it on Hellion Vivian's thin lips. He waited until drops of blood dyed her pale lips red. Then with a splash, he jumped into the river Styx without a care. The mermaids were shocked. Some even forgot their own song. After all, their king, who was obsessed with cleanliness, never got close to the river Styx, let alone touch the water of the river Styx. But now, he was actually standing in the river Styx, enduring the filth and inhuman coldness. He lowered his head to fish for something, looking very persistent. Chapter 1002. Bailey Jiaju turned his head sideways. The light in his eyes coldly swept past their faces one by one, carrying an extremely deep cold light. Only then did the mermaids retract their gazes and concentrate on their task. A clear and ethereal voice came little by little from the surface of the river, rising up layers of thin fog. Only at this time could the naked eye see the souls sinking to the bottom of the river. In order to find them, Baligaju must hide the demonic nature in his body. The temperature of the river Styx was extremely low, and a mortal body could not withstand the bone-piercing cold at all. This caused the rebellious race to have second thoughts. Eat him, eat him. He went down the river Styx, and won't have any magic power in a short time. They wanted to take this opportunity to clean up Baligaju's body. After all, this man's blood was an absolute tonic for them. Such a situation would not happen a second time. It was indeed so. Hellion Vivian would never know. For her, that arrogant and aloof man revealed his weakness for the first time. The sharp claws of the wraiths pierced towards his back. With his ability, even without the demonic nature, he could completely avoid it. However, he just turned his body slightly, protecting the soul that he had just fished up in his hand, and allowed the sharp claws to pierce through his left shoulder and into his shoulder bone. The evil spirits laughed as if they had succeeded. However, before they had enough of the wonderful taste of the blood, their whole bodies seemed to be burned by a raging fire, and they wailed as they turned into fireworks in the air. It turned out that even Baligaju's blood was full of demonic nature that no undead could bear. That powerful force was sick to a certain extent, and it was not something they could bear at all. After seeing this scene, the other evil spirits who originally wanted to get a share of the meal all paled. They should not take a step forward at all, and could only tremble and beg Baligaju to spare them. However, this time, Baligaju did not seem to see their existence. He did not cut them up, nor did he ask them to scram. He just bent down and continued to focus on fishing something. He didn't seem to feel any pain at all. Blood dripped down his shoulder. He carefully held the second soul, not letting his blood stain the soul strands. No one had seen Baligaju like this. His usually beautiful fingers were red from the cold, and there were many black bruises on them. But he did not care at all. He was so serious, so persistent, so afraid of missing something, and stood in the river Styx for a full 4 hours. Only when the water from the Styx River dyed the ends of his hair, and his whole body was wet, did he come ashore. His eyes stared motionlessly at Hellion Wei, who was lying in the sea of flowers. His whole body was cold, and something in his heart seemed to be gradually freezing. The mermaids were still singing, like the sound of a guqin pouring out in torrents. But there seemed to be an unknown flame burning in Baligaju's chest, rampaging inside his body, and could not find a way out. She did not wake up. She did not wake up. His favorite red spider lily bloomed beside the Nirvana River in full swing. He finally got his wish, and obtained a complete rebirth. However, the person who always held him in the palm of her hand and protected him would never come back. I want you to be happy and not be alone anymore. This is my wish. Why? Why didn't he stop earlier when he heard those words? Bailey Jiaju moved his Adam's apple with difficulty. He clenched his fists until they were covered in blood, but he didn't move at all. It was as if his entire person had melted into the darkness, blending into the night. The night wind blew quietly. In the swaying shadow of the sea of flowers, Baligaju still stood in the same place. Drop by drop, the blood on his body fell on the white snow. Except for the day he fell, when he was immersed in the chaos for a few days. He, who had always been cold and noble, had never been in such a sorry state like this. His upbringing did not allow him to do anything beneath his dignity. But now, he lowered his eyes and buried his head in Hellion Vivian's chest. He really wanted this person to wake up, no matter what she wanted him to do. He slammed his hand on the ground, and black feathers fluttered down. With him as the center, countless resentful spirits were affected and turned into ashes in an instant. The huge resentful energy above the Nirvana River was cut open by the black smoke. The boundary of the Grand Barrier was broken, and it shattered into pieces. At this moment, the mermaids stopped singing, and all of them floated to the surface of the river. It was not because of anything else, but because they had never seen that high and mighty man cry one day. Everyone knew that no matter if it was a human, a god, or a Buddha, they would cry when they were born. Only Baligaju, who was born from the chaos, came to this world with a smile. The corners of his mouth curled up as if he was born with a rebellious expression. Such a person was actually shedding tears here. Not only the mermaids, but even the spirits of the dead within a few hundred miles stopped floating. Baligaju's eyes were filled with red marks, and the dark aura emitted from his body went straight to Buddha's Amitabha mountain. The three realms were shaken, but no one could do anything to Baligaju. The Hades shook violently, and the king of hell could not stand steadily. He simply took the opportunity to hug his beloved woman. The judge could not stand it anymore, and accidentally fell into the fourth prison. The entire Hades was in chaos, and many spirits of the dead began to choose their path in panic, and the reapers were swayed. In the human world, Bailey Shangxia clumsily hugged a little girl, who was only a head shorter than him, and walked in the snow. There was no longer any of his previous hostility, and his whole body was noble and cold. He stood in the coffin shop that he was most unwilling to go to. Qingchen was quietly nestled in his arms, and her little face had lost all color. She was lying on Bailey Shangxia's shoulder, and her lips were pale. The owner of the coffin shop had a single word: Bing. He wore a black suit, and held a black notebook in his hand. He wore flat glasses on the bridge of his nose to reduce his hostility, but his handsome and cold side profile still revealed the fact that he was not human. Wake him up, and I will pay you the money. Bailey Shangxia's voice was very low, and he looked like a little adult. Bing heard this, raised his eyebrows, and subconsciously tried to feel Hellion Qingchen's ears. Those little ears were still drooping, but there was no silver earring on them, and they looked empty. Bing's thick eyebrows frowned. No? Chapter 1003. Hey, what's wrong with this kid? The other boss, Casso, bent his slender fingers, and was about to poke the soft little face when Bailey Shangxia turned around and avoided the action. Casso curled his lips and muttered, I can't even touch him. Bailey Shangxia looked at him expressionlessly and said in a lukewarm voice, You are the Grim Reaper, and your aura has a bad influence on him. Is that so? Casso frowned. How come he didn't know there was such a saying? Bing was obviously more reliable. He closed the notebook in his hand and said in a lukewarm voice, He is not yet enlightened, and his physique is different from yours. However, your father's magic is too strong, and it has affected him. Put him in the coffin first. If your father can come back, everything will be easy. Bailey Shangxia did not speak, and did not refuse to deal with the Grim Reaper as before. For him now, nothing was more important than his younger brother. Bailey Shangxia bent down and put Hellion Qingchen, who was smaller than him, into the softest coffin. He did not leave, but looked at the little person beside him. When Hellion Qingchen felt uncomfortable, he fed her with the prepared water, and touched the little person's head with his fingers. as if he was comforting her. Casso shook his head in disbelief. I didn't expect this vicious kid to have a brother complex. He used to only know how to eat people. All demons are like this. Bing's voice was very deep. Especially demons who are demonized often do a lot of things that they regret. What's more, he is a purebred demon. Killing people is just a means of survival for him. Demons are naturally cunning and selfish. You don't like them, do you? Casso smiled. I don't like them, but compared to humans, demons are not the dirtiest. So if this matter can be solved perfectly, we probably don't need to do anything, right? I don't want to fight with that man. In the end, I will only lose miserably. Even the king of hell did not win, right? But if it's ice, it might last for a long time. Don't talk to me with your cowherd. Bing pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose. We won't fight. Everything is unpredictable. Was there a variable? Casso looked out of the window. That's right, that person should appear. The death gods were right. At the bottom of the Hades, at the end of the red spider lily, a man indeed walked over. He was no longer dressed like he did in ancient times. He wore a white shirt and coffee-colored trousers. His entire person was clean like the moon hanging high in the sky, gentle and jade-like. Behind him was a little person with a gloomy face. The little person was holding a small gourd, and had dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a ghost, but because he was tugging on the man's sleeve, he looked especially cute. Bailey Jiaju's silver-white long hair was dyed with pitch-black ink, dripping in front of his body. He allowed the river water to permeate his long robe and mix with the blood on his chest, motionless. The man walked to Beligage's side and then paused. His eyes slid across Hellion Vivian's face like water. She is still the same as when she was in Mountain Tenya. As long as you are in trouble, her first reaction is to protect you. Beligaju slowly raised his head and said in a deep voice, Jing Wushuang. It's rare to see you in such a mess. Jing Wushuang's words were directed at Beligaju, but her eyes never moved away from Hellion Vivian. That was the tenderness that she had indulged for thousands of years. In this case, her sacrifice is not in vain. Do you know why she wanted to extract the Buddha bone? Because she didn't want to obey the order of Buddhism to hunt you down. Beligaju suddenly trembled. His fingers clenched tighter as if he had lost all senses. Since I met her, she could only live in Mountain Tenya. Unlike other people, she didn't have her own palace. The vast land of Prajna was her place of cultivation. When she was very young, she liked to eat steamed buns. Every time, she would sit under me and eat the steamed buns quietly. Those people of Buddhism never played with her. Jing Wushuang retracted her gaze and looked at Beligaju's face. But she always went to that place, as if she was looking for someone. In the past, I always thought that I met her earlier. Later, I realized that the person she was looking for was you. Jing Wushuang squatted down and looked at Hellion Vivian. She was always different from others. So many people entered Buddhism on Mountain Tenya, who didn't want the protection of the golden lotus. But she poured the fairy water that she worked so hard to obtain on me. If only I could have met her earlier. Then the person she likes now would be me. In Mountain Tenya, I always thought so, desperately trying to transform into a human. But I forgot that this kind of thing had nothing to do with who met her earlier. Because the person who made her not feel lonely and full of different expressions was you. Beligaju paused with his wet body. His chest seemed to be torn apart by something. Large amounts of blood flowed out silently from inside. He originally thought that when she asked him to leave, it would be the most painful. However, when he saw her blocking in front of him without moving, he really felt the pain that humans talked about. It was like lines after lines were densely crawling all over his chest. With hatred, with unwillingness, and with an unprecedented heartache. Jing Wushuang's eyes were deep. He loosened his slender and white fingers, which were the feathers of the phoenix. Just fishing up the soul can't guarantee that she will wake up. She needs the Buddhist voice to gather the soul. I'm here to repay the fate that she planted in me. In the future, I will treat her well. After saying that, Jing Wushuang stood up. He didn't look at the scene behind. The little one followed behind him in confusion. He looked at him with his big eyes. Master, why don't you see her? You obviously want to see that lord for a long time. She doesn't need it. Jing Wushuang reached out his hand and rubbed the little one's head. There was desolation in his eyes. That's good. I don't want her to feel that she owes me. The little one didn't understand why the feelings were so complicated. However, the little one knew very well that if it weren't for the blood of Hellion Vivian, his master would never have come back. Now that his master had returned everything to that lord, everything should be over. How could it be over? The 10,000 steps of the path of Buddha worship were sincere kowtowing. It wasn't something that anyone could do. As a resentful baby, the little one didn't understand what kind of existence Hellion Vivian was to Jing Wushuang. Sometimes, it was because she was too important. That was why he chose to withdraw silently and retreated to the position of a good friend, so that she would no longer feel that she owed her. Chapter 1004. The night was very dark, and there was fog everywhere. Hellion Vivian felt like she was soaked in water, and there was gentle water flowing in all directions. Apart from that touch, she could not feel anything else. Her body felt like it was sinking, and even she did not know where she was going. Her mind was empty, and she did not have any consciousness, until she felt a chill on her neck, as if something had seeped into her body. It was much colder than the river, but she could not ignore it. Who was it? Who was it that was whispering into her ear? Hellion Vivian wanted to open her eyes, but her body did not listen to her command. Vaguely, her soul seemed to have gone to the place that everyone wanted to reach. On the top of Tinya Mountain, golden lotuses were everywhere. The venerable sat on the golden lotuses as usual, and his eyes were full of disdain and pity for her. Phoenix, how many times have I told you that you were destined to be alone from the moment you were born? This is your destiny, but you refused to listen, and insisted on pursuing something that did not belong to you. You were arrogant and rebellious, and I tolerated you, because you were brought here by the true Buddha. But what about you? Do you really think that you can be with the emperor? Phoenix, some people are born lowly, and they are suitable to be dogs. Since you have sharp claws, you should cleanse the sins of the world for Buddhism. Don't think that you can be with anyone forever, because no matter who it is, they will abandon you in the end. Baligaju is the same. Since he has fallen from heaven and become a demon, when you two meet again, you will only be a beautiful soul to him at most. Hellion Vivian smiled. Even though she was covered in wounds, she still held the phoenix scimitar in her hand, and said arrogantly, "What does my life have to do with you?" The venerable's eyes were full of darkness. "You will definitely regret your decision today." "I won't." Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips, which were stained with blood. "Even if I die, I will drag you down with me." Pung. The phoenix blade was raised. That kind of aura that could overwhelm everyone. Or it could be said that it was extremely cold and luxurious, made the Buddhist aura suddenly disappear. At the same time, it was filled with a kind of flame that could annihilate 1,000 soldiers. Hellion Vivian was a ruthless person. If she wasn't happy, she wouldn't let the other party be happy either. When she opened her eyes, there was still a thick murderous aura in them. What entered his eyes was a completely classical European architectural style. Layers of black purplish gold curtains, a large curved back velvet sofa, a long bench with silver-painted armrests, and a blazing fire in the fireplace. It appeared old-fashioned and tranquil. The silver moonlight poured down like water, enveloping the roses in front of the window, giving people a kind of dark beauty. It was enough to show that the owner of this house had good taste. Hellion Vivian wanted to get up, but before she could move, she felt the bed shake, and she was embraced by an ice-cold embrace. He hugged her very tightly, as if he wanted to crush her. His silver-white hair cascaded down the side of his face, falling straight into her neck. There was even a heart-wrenching dampness on his hair. Hellion Vivian finally reacted and reached out to grab him. "You? Shut up." The man was very close to her, and the cold breath he exhaled hit her skin little by little, which didn't match his hoarse voice at all. Hellion Vivian was obedient at this time. Although she didn't know why a certain highness was angry, she still had to be obedient at this time. After a while she spoke. Only then did she open her mouth and say, "Is your demonic nature gone?" "It seems to be gone." Baligaju didn't answer her. Something seemed to be ignited in those long and narrow eyes of his. Under the straight bridge of his nose, his thin lips opened slightly. Idiot. I'm not an idiot. Helene Vivian felt that she had to prove herself. You don't know, when my soul was pulled out just now, I saw that old man, the venerable one. He actually dared to laugh at me, and I killed him with a single slash. In fact, the venerable one had died long ago. When one's soul was pulled out, they would remember things that happened a long time ago. Helene Vivian had experienced the scene that she saw long ago, but her consciousness was a bit hazy, and she mistakenly thought that it was real. But Baligaju didn't know about this matter. Now that he heard it, he understood what Jing Wushuang said. He wondered if at that time, everyone was forcing her to go down the path of the devil, to take him back. This idiot was injured in a place where he couldn't see. Baligaju tightened his fingers and pressed her back into his embrace. This kind of thing won't happen again in the future. Huh? Helene Vivian was a bit confused. Did he mean that he wouldn't use the devil transformation in the future? That's good. Helene Vivian was very happy. And as soon as she was happy, her stomach began to growl. Her body was still a bit weak, but the weaker she was, the emptier her stomach felt. Baligaju naturally also felt the growl. He raised his head and looked at her, his handsome face looking good. Helene Vivian seriously looked at Baligaju and defended herself. Fighting is a very energy-consuming thing. It's normal to be hungry. Baligaju didn't care what excuse she found, and directly carried her in his arms, walking over to the long wooden table. The table was covered with a black tablecloth, and there were a few bouquets of red roses as decorations. Unlike humans, the demons did not have desserts on their tables. Instead, they had buckets of fresh blood and fine wine. He put her down, and his fingers picked up a bottle of wine. He casually opened it with his fangs, and leaned his enviable back against the wooden chair. He held her with one hand, and his thin lips slightly raised, adding a touch of gentleness to his doll-like face. What do you want to eat? Not now, let's go back to the human world first. Helene Vivian was worried about the two little ones. She wasn't sure if such a big demon would affect Shangxie and Qingshan. Even if she was hungry, it was difficult for her to eat in peace. She pulled Baligaju and was about to leave. However, just as she got up, Baligaju held her hand, and then carried her up. His side profile was unbelievably gentle. Helene Vivian felt that this time when she woke up, His Highness seemed to be doting on her unbelievably. In the past, His Highness would walk in front, and she would follow behind, carrying a lot of things. Being carried like this didn't suit her image of an arms tycoon. But forget it, as long as he was happy. After all, as a domineering CEO, she had to know how to be considerate. It's really going to end soon, but I need to write something with love. Don't worry, I won't drag it out. I'll hug and nibble on all of you. Coming to this city of books, the happiest thing was to get to know all of you. I hope that it will end happily, and that we can still be together in the future if fate wills it. Chapter 1005. My lord, are we not going over? The judge hiding in the dark alley respectfully asked the person beside him. The king of hell leaned against the wall, and crossed his arms in front of his chest. I'm not going there, he said with a wild aura. Then why are we standing here? The judge was very puzzled. With their status, it was really indecent for them to do such sneaky actions. Furthermore, they were from the Hades. If they were discovered peeping like this in the demon world, it would be very embarrassing. The king of hell stood in all directions, and said with a domineering expression, What do you know? This is called observing the enemy. The judge was speechless. My lord, wake up, please. That His Highness has never been your love rival. Can you change this idea of being a love rival all over the world? Also, if it wasn't for you not taking the madam seriously, how would you end up like this? Of course, the judge only thought about it, and did not dare to say it out loud. The king of hell looked at Baligaju's back and narrowed his eyes. This guy can actually be a demon so calmly. To be honest, they came from the same place, the beginning of chaos. The reason why he could maintain his rationality was because he was in charge of the underworld from the very beginning. Unlike Beligaju, who insisted on being the emperor in the heavenly axiom, he had long suspected that that person had taken a liking to something in the upper realm when he was young. Otherwise, with that guy's original appearance, how could he have stayed in the heavenly axiom? After all, they were all the same, emitting viciousness from their bones. They were more selfish than anyone else. Apart from killing, there was nothing that they found interesting. The king of hell always wondered what would become of that person when he tore off that layer of noble holiness and was only left with his original demonic nature. He estimated that the other party would cause more damage than him. After all, he was from the wild faction and would do whatever he wanted. That person's heart was indeed black. But now, he was actually able to control his destructive nature very well. Was he afraid of hurting someone? Heh. Thinking of this, King of Hell suddenly smiled. Let's go. You're leaving just like that? Didn't you need to observe the enemy? The judge scratched his head. King of Hell's thin lips curved. A married old man is no longer competitive for me. The judge was speechless. A married old man? My lord, are you sure you're not jealous of Her Highness' beauty? Beligaju controlled his demonic nature, and the underworld was no longer in chaos. The undead who came and went finally rejoined the reincarnation queue. One by one, they stood there in a straight line, only wanting to be reincarnated into a good body. It had to be said that after Beligaju's torment, the order in Hades was much better than before. Previously, those undead were either making a fuss about not wanting to go to hell, or not wanting to drink Granny Meng's soup. Eventually, a ghost messenger had to come out and suppress them. Now they were extremely obedient because they found that even if they suffered the pain of being fried, it was still better than being annihilated by the devil chi that soared into the sky. The capital was also known as Sijio City. It described the layout of the city. There were many gates, such as Tiananmen, Dianmen, Donganmen, Xianmen, and countless others. It was not easy for ordinary people to find 2 children in this bustling city. The traffic in the capital was notoriously terrible in Wuxia. Everywhere one went, there would be traffic jams. Taking the subway was even more crowded, especially now that it was rush hour. Whether it was line 10 or line 4, they were full of cars. No one would know that above their heads in the dark sky, there was a man wearing a black t-shirt, with huge black wings behind him. He wore a pair of gloves that clung tightly to his skin, like a demon described in comics, and landed in a dilapidated alley. This alley was located in the old city of the capital, next to Shikahai, and further ahead was the built inclined tobacco pouch street. At this time, the inclined tobacco pouch street was always full of dazzling lineups. One could see clear bars everywhere, red lights and green willows. Most of the people who came here were tourists. Everyone was holding their phones to take pictures, and happy faces could be seen everywhere. In fact, the real alley in old Beijing was not here, but turned right and kept going inside. If someone came here at this time, they would definitely see the demon coming out of the night, and the Grim Reaper welcoming him. Hey, you finally found me. Casso was no longer wearing human clothes, but a cloak like a cloak. He looked at Beligaju lazily. They are all in the house, but Bing has always disliked the existence of demon feathers in our place. So your highness, please put away your wings. How about it? Beligaju looked at him indifferently. Casso did not understand what the other party meant. Hellion Vivian came over and happily explained for him. He wants to say whether you are stupid or not. If you want to enter the door, of course you have to put away your wings. Otherwise you will definitely be met. In that case, you don't need to remind him. Casso, thank you for explaining it to me. He gritted his teeth as he said this. Unlike Bing, who was still flipping through the black notebook, when he saw Bailey Jiaju and Hellion Weiwei in front of him, he just raised his eyebrows. Then he lowered his head and calculated on the abacus. His voice was calm as he said, the cost of accommodation, food, and coffin is 300 billion in total. 300 billion? Hellion Vivian was stunned. Do coffins make so much money now? Casso snorted and was very proud. We accept hell money. 1 yuan could buy millions of hell money. What was there to be proud of? Hellion Vivian felt better. Besides, looking at the 2 people, her son should be fine. Bailey Shangxia was indeed fine. But Hellion Qingchen was a little tired. But he was much better than when he came. When Hellion Vivian and the others came in, he was sitting in the coffin like a kitten with his ears down, holding the milk that Bailey Shangxia had just poured for him. When he saw Hellion Vivian, his eyes immediately lit up, and he wanted to pounce on Hellion Vivian. Baligaju blocked him, put one hand in his pocket, and picked up the little girl with the other. His elegant and domineering look was mixed with his appearance, like a big boss fighting for territory. He raised Qingchen high and looked at her in the eye. His thick eyebrows frowned. Is the devil's aura stronger than the Reiki? Qingchen's blood was 90% Reiki, and the remaining 10% was devil's aura. But now the devil's aura was stronger than the Reiki. In addition to the increase of the devil's aura, the most important reason was that the Reiki in his body had decreased. Generally speaking, no one could affect the Reiki in his body because he was the descendant of the phoenix unless Chapter 1006. The phoenix's spiritual energy was also weakened to the extreme. Baligage's deep eyes suddenly narrowed. He turned his head and looked in the direction of Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian was a little confused by his gaze. She blinked her eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Baligaju thought for a moment. He picked up the little one and placed him on top of his head. He felt the power in his body again. Hellion Qingchen grabbed the hair under his palms with two little claws. He looked at Bailey Shangxia with his big round eyes, as if he was asking his father what was wrong with him. Bailey Shangxia was worried that his little brother would be thrown by his father, so he reached out to catch him. He was not tall, so his noble and serious little face coupled with his action looked a little funny. After Baligaju felt the power, he threw Qingchen to his eldest son. Then he pulled Hellion Vivian over. He looked around and asked in a deep voice, "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Does being hungry count?" Hellion Vivian asked seriously. Baligaju was stunned. He reached out his finger and knocked on her head. "What do you want to eat?" "Too many things. Crabs, lobsters, steaks, and so on." Hellion Vivian saw that her two sons were fine. She instantly regained her fighting spirit. Basically, they were talking about meat. Baligaju pulled them over and said to the two little ones without looking back, "Follow me." Then he walked out of the coffin shop. The Grim Reapers would not stop him, especially Bing, who did not want him to stay here. He had never liked demons, but this did not stop them from earning money from demons. Moreover, the devil's aura overpowered the spiritual energy in the little one's body. This was not normal. Leaving an abnormal factor in the coffin shop would only attract the attention of the patrollers in the human world. Unlike Casso, Bing's thinking had reached a certain level of precision. On the other hand, Casso was a little reluctant to leave. He looked at Qingchen and said, "Little brat, when are you coming back? I can introduce you to other children. Have you seen our little king of hell? He is now wandering around the human world all day, and his goal is to woo Little Hook every day. You will definitely like these two little brothers when you see them. Listen to your brother and come here often, okay? Most importantly, remember to bring an apple the next time you come. The redder the color, the better." The Grim Reaper liked to eat apples. Qingchen knew this from reading manga. She didn't expect the Grim Reaper to be like this in real life. "If I bring apple, will you bring me to the underworld to play?" Qingchen had always been smart, and she quickly began to negotiate with Casso. Casso didn't refuse, but he found it strange. "Why do you want to go to the underworld? The underworld is not fun at all. There is no cotton candy or ice cream. Even His Highness Little King of Hell goes to the human world every day. Why do you want to go to the underworld?" "Because the underworld is a little further away from the demon world. It is too hard for my brother to go to the demon world by himself. I can go with him, carry his small school bag, and bring him chocolate cake." Qingchen said seriously. Bailey Shangxia, who was standing at the side, was warmed by his younger brother's cuteness. He conveniently picked up the little one, who was a head shorter than him. "There is no need to negotiate with him. Next time I go to the demon world, I will bring you with me." In this way, he would not always be in danger from his father. He could also protect his little brother at all times. The last time he went to the demon world to cultivate, His little brother was bullied in the human world. This bullied referred to the incident with little Fatty Chung. It was enough to prove how serious Bailey Shangxia's brother was. Baligaju wasn't worried that the two little ones couldn't keep up with his pace. After walking out of the alley, they arrived at the bustling street of Hohai. The street was filled with the atmosphere of the human world. Everyone was very happy. The resident singers in the bar were handsome and beautiful. They were very pleasing to the eye. However, even in such a crowded street, Helian Weiwei's family of four still received a high number of heads turning. Especially a man like Baligaju. It seemed that no matter where you threw him, he would be the first to be noticed. Bailey Shangxia was evaluating which human soul was more delicious. His father glanced at him, indicating that he should find a place to eat. Shouldn't this kind of thing be done by the adults? Bailey Shangxia complained in his heart while his eyes fell on a shabu-shabu shop. There were a lot of people in line. The business should be good. Mom and little brother both liked to eat hot pot. Although Bailey Shangxia was a demon and very sinister and cunning, he still abided by some cultured rules, such as waiting in line for a seat. This shabu-shabu shop was indeed very popular. There were more than a dozen tables in front of Helian Vivian and her family. Helian Vivian wasn't in a hurry. In order to eat the delicious shabu-shabu, she first bought a fried chicken chop to fill her stomach. First she bent down and fed the two little ones. Then she fed Baligaju a bite. Finally, she ate it herself. It felt very comfortable to walk on the street. Every shop had its own specialties. Eating fried chicken and drinking iced tea like this, even His Highness seemed to be gentler. It wasn't Helian Vivian's illusion. Since she woke up, His Highness had been very gentle. If there was such a man who deliberately put his arms around you to prevent others from touching you when walking in a crowd, then he would be like this. When he lowered his head, he would smell the sandalwood fragrance of the other party, which proved that he really liked you. Bailey Jiaju was obviously a person who loved cleanliness and would never allow anyone to touch him. But now, he would rather be stained by himself, so that he could turn sideways to protect himself. Helian Vivian was slow, but she wasn't a blockhead. Looking at the side of his face covered by silver hair, she kissed him without thinking. Baligaju suddenly froze. He looked back at her, his eyes deep and dark. Helian Vivian suddenly felt that His Highness must be touched. The novel was right. As a military tycoon, as long as he could give his other half a hot kiss at a critical moment, he could conquer the other half from body to heart. This was the activity that Helian Vivian was most satisfied with deep down in her heart. But the reality was, give me a tissue. Helian Vivian. What for? Wipe your face. There's oil on your mouth. Baligaju's voice was very light. When it was light to a certain extent, it was extremely lethal. Helian Vivian was immediately petrified. She didn't understand why His Highness always liked to ruin the atmosphere. It was fine if he didn't open his mouth, but once he did, it would ruin his drool-inducing face. Well, sons are still the most likable. Chapter 1007. As Helian Vivian thought about it, she lowered her head and fed the two little ones another mouthful of chicken steak. The family of four walked around for about an hour and a half before it was their turn to eat. The important task of ordering was handed over to Bailey Shangxia. In Baligaju's words, he was already so old that he should learn to do it himself. Helian Vivian was speechless. She once again felt that there was a problem with her family's education method. Bailey Shangxia didn't have any objections. He liked to spend money for his younger brother and mother, not to mention that he now had an income. His red eyes scanned the menu and finally landed on the staple food page. Handmade noodles. The waiter lowered his head and noted it down. Bailey Shangxia thought about it carefully for a while and said in a faint voice, "I want everything except this. Give me 2 bottles of wine." Hearing this, the waiter was stunned. He wanted everything except handmade noodles. The waiter decisively turned his head away, thinking that he really couldn't listen to the child's random order. He had to wait for the adults to make the decision. Just do as he says. Thank you. Helian Vivian was very polite when she smiled. The waiter was completely dumbfounded. Why was even the adults like this? Customer, perhaps you don't know, but our beef and mutton are all real ingredients. It's not the same as the ones sold outside. Don't mention how full it is. 2 adults and 2 children really can't eat so much. Why don't you choose more carefully? The waiter spoke with a Beijing accent and was very good at service. Helene Vivian liked this kind of authentic old Beijing people the most. She thanked him again and said, "Master, I know you have a good heart, but don't worry, we have a big appetite." Hearing that there were so many customers, the waiter didn't say anything more. He just muttered in his heart that how could they possibly finish all the food. They ordered everything. There were 28 plates of meat alone, not to mention all kinds of meatballs, tofu, vegetables, and noodles. Helene Vivian and the others were sitting at a table that couldn't fit all the food, so they used 3 carts to put the ingredients. All the waiters didn't think that they could finish all the food. However, what they didn't expect was that, in just an hour, the 2 carts were empty. When the waiter went in to add soup to the copper pot, Helene Vivian and the others were eating from the 3rd cart. They ate in a rather refined manner. But the ingredients could go down in the blink of an eye. What kind of people were they? Could it be that he had not eaten for a long time after robbing a tomb in the mountains? But even so, it was still too cruel. A total of 28 plates of meat, gone just like that. Gone. What was even worse was that one of the beautiful women actually rubbed her stomach and said, "I don't think I'm full. Forget it. Let's have supper when we get home." The waiter was speechless. Where did this person come from? When paying the bill, the cashier's hand trembled. The list was too long. When she looked up at the family of 4 in front of her, she thought that she had made a mistake. But it wasn't. It was them. The cashier was a little dizzy as she paid the bill for the other party. She felt like the whole world was a fantasy. Were all children nowadays so good at eating? In fact, it was fortunate that Helene Vivian and the others were sitting in a private room. Otherwise, with so many plates of meat being served and empty plates being taken down, it would definitely attract a lot of people to watch. However, Helene Vivian really felt that she was not full. After returning to the villa, she felt that her stomach was empty. This time, she didn't cook at home, because just as she was about to go to the kitchen, Beligaju grabbed her hand. "What do you want to eat? I'll make it." "Steak." Helene Vivian knew that the only dish that a certain highness knew how to cook now was steak. When they were in Kikishili, he had made it for her once. Unfortunately, she was weak at that time and couldn't eat it at all, so it was wasted. If she could eat it this time, it would be a happy occasion. Beligaju replied indifferently, "Okay." Wearing a black set of home clothes, he stood tall in the kitchen. His slender fingers took out olive oil and red wine. When he put the steak into the oil pot, there was an enticing sizzling sound, and the whole room was filled with the fragrance of meat. The kitchen was open, and Helene Vivian could see such a beautiful scene from the high chair. Some men were really good to marry, such as a certain highness. Even frying steak looked like he was on the cover of a magazine. As if noticing Helene Vivian's gaze, Beligaju casually put one hand in his trouser pocket while waiting for the steak, and hooked his other hand at her. Helene Vivian leaned over and was kissed. As expected, his breath was different from hers. The man's lips were always soft and cold, and they were filled with the intoxicating scent of mint and sandalwood. Helene Vivian always wanted to take the initiative most of the time, but she was always suppressed by the man domineeringly. "Kiss me later. I'm still frying the steak." She made it sound as if she was very introverted. He was the one who kissed her first. Helene Vivian knew that she was not as good as the man, so she didn't dwell on this issue. Seeing a small piece of steak being served, she opened her mouth and took a bite. Beligaju always had unprecedented patience when feeding Helene Vivian. The 2 of them held a plate of steak and nestled on the sofa. They ate one bite after another, and the red wine beside them was full. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was the night view of the entire capital. It was bustling like countless stars. In the past, when Helene Vivian took back her mother's business, she had seen such a night scene. But at that time, she only felt desolate. But now it was different. It turned out that the saying was right. The scenery wasn't important. What was important was who was by your side to appreciate it. We're done eating again. Baligaju hugged Hellion Vivian. His handsome face turned a little, and his eyes were looking at something else. Are you still hungry? Hellion Vivian felt for a moment, and then yawned. I'm not hungry, but I want to sleep. Sleep after eating. Bailey Jiaju looked at the person on the bed. She was always particularly quiet when she was sleeping. Her slender and fair wrist would always be resting on one side, and her long chestnut curly hair would fall to the side, giving people a kind of lingering beauty. It was not unreasonable that the Phoenix Dharma idol was the most beautiful Dharma idol in the Buddhist world. If her soul hadn't been taken away, Baligaju would think that she was pregnant again. But now, Baligaju intuitively felt that Hellion Vivian's reaction was related to her soul being taken away. Chapter 1008. What was strange was that nothing had changed about Hellion Vivian. Apart from being able to eat a little more, everything else was normal. Was he thinking too much? Bailey Jiaju caressed Hellion Weiwei's cheeks with his fingers, and reached out to pull her into his embrace. Hellion Vivian seemed to have sensed his breath, so she tilted her head and buried her face in his chest. Bailey Jiaju's gentleness was always hidden inadvertently. For example, right now when Hellion Weiwei moved, he seemed to be able to comfort her. He tilted his head and naturally kissed her black hair. Hellion Vivian moved again and hugged Baligaju's waist tightly. She was indeed very domineering in this aspect. She had to hold on tightly to what was hers. Baligaju chuckled softly. He always misunderstood a certain someone. Other than helplessness, he also doted on her. The two of them hugged each other, and their shadows were reflected on the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was filled with stars, and it was beautiful and romantic. The fireworks in the sky reflected Baligaju's watery gaze, as if that moment was eternal. The next day, the gentle morning light shone through the curtains. There were white roses planted outside the villa, and the room was filled with a faint fragrance. As soon as Hellion Weiwei opened her eyes, she habitually wanted to find water to drink. Her bare feet casually stepped on the wooden floor, reached for a bottle of cold water, and raised her head to drink. She wanted to go back to bed and continue sleeping. However, she didn't know if it was her imagination, but she felt that her hair was especially long today. Also, the bed seemed to have become bigger. When Hellion Vivian lay back down, she lowered her eyes and looked at her ankle-length hair. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. In the end, she felt that it wasn't a big deal, so she tilted her head and planned to continue sleeping with His Highness. After all, with His Highness's figure, it was very comfortable to sleep with him in her arms. However, her hand had just wrapped around him when Bailey Jiaju woke up. After his deep eyes saw her, he was stunned for a moment. Then he pressed down on her hand. Because he had just woken up, his voice still carried a trace of hoarseness and gloominess. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? No. Hellion Vivian didn't understand why His Highness kept asking her this question yesterday. She raised her eyebrows. What's wrong? Baligaju looked at the figure in front of him and said in a faint voice, Nothing. It's good that you're not feeling uncomfortable. Then let's continue to sleep. Hellion Vivian hugged him and was in a good mood. Let's stay in bed. With her eyes closed, Hellion Vivian's skin was milky white, and her facial features were more tender. Her arms and legs were much smaller than before. Her face was also small, with a unique stubbornness. Her snow-white kasaya dragged on the ground like flowing water. Her soft black hair hung down beside her body, like a lotus flower blooming silently on the surface of the water at night. Baligaju remembered the first time he saw Phoenix on Mountain Tenya. At that time, she was also very quiet. She didn't speak or smile, like a little jade sculpture. That's right. The person in his arms had returned to her childhood appearance. Obviously, this was the result of her soul being taken away. Phoenix had returned to her embryonic form when she transformed into a human on Mountain Tenya. As long as she was given some time to read more Buddhist scriptures and drink a few bottles of divine water, it would be helpful for her growth. Baligaju had studied the matter of raising little Phoenix when he was in Tiandao. At that time, he wanted to snatch Hellion Vivian from Buddhism and raise her himself, not to mention now. After knowing these reasons, His Highness was much calmer. When he took a second look at Hellion Vivian, the corners of his mouth lifted into a sinister smile. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Hellion Vivian lay in his arms, quietly opened her big eyes that were as clear as mercury. With her fluffy hair hanging down, she looked very dazed. Baligaju buried his face in her long hair and chuckled. "Nothing. I feel like something is wrong," Hellion Vivian said very seriously. Baligaju raised his eyebrows and asked casually, "Then what do you think is wrong?" "How would I know what you're laughing at?" Hellion Vivian felt that something was wrong the moment he opened his eyes. "Is there something on my face?" Baligaju held the person in his arms, and the corners of his mouth were still curled up, full of evil. "No, do you still want to sleep? Or get up and eat something? Let's eat." Hellion Vivian sighed helplessly. "I can't sleep because of your laughter." Baligaju hummed in agreement, and held Hellion Vivian up with a faint smile. He seemed to be unbelievably gentle. "What do you want to eat? Meat is not good. You can't digest it." Hellion Vivian was obviously confused by this arrangement. "I've always digested it well." That was before. After Baligaju put her on the chair, he bent down and kissed her forehead. He smiled. "Now you have to be more careful. Drink a cup of milk first." Hellion Weiwei never refused food. When she saw Bailey Jiaju put the milk on the wooden table, she didn't even think about it before she picked it up and took a sip. Halfway through the drink, she suddenly paused and looked at her hand. It wasn't an illusion. Her hands had become smaller. Hellion Vivian stood up immediately and turned her head to look at the half-open dressing mirror. There was only one thought left in her mind. "Damn, Sakya is definitely playing with me." As Hellion Vivian herself, she hadn't seen herself as a child for a long time. After all, she was a person who didn't like to take photos. Now that she saw it, she just wanted to run a few laps downstairs and have some peace and quiet. What's going on? No wonder His Highness suddenly asked her to drink milk. Hellion Vivian turned around and looked at Baligaju. That person didn't seem to care. Nor did he mind that little Phoenix was looking at him with hidden bitterness. He poured a cup of milk for Hellion Vivian. "Drink more milk, and you'll grow faster." So this was what he was smiling at from the beginning. Hellion Vivian was depressed. She sat on the wooden chair and didn't say anything. She just held the milk and drank it. Baligaju found it very interesting. He couldn't help but hug her and raise her above his head. The smile on his face was unprecedentedly bright. "You're so cute, Hellion Vivian." She had never seen Baligaju like this before. Did he like her that much when she was small? Baligaju loved her so much that he couldn't put her down. Why? Hellion Vivian was right. Baligaju really liked her this way. After all, His Highness was very obsessed with Phoenix when she was young. He didn't have the chance to raise her in the past. Now that he finally had the chance, of course he would have this kind of reaction. But you don't have to carry her everywhere you go. Hellion Weiwei helplessly supported her forehead, just like a little Buddhist monk. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.